Okay, so after a ton of work, I finally managed to go 2-0. So apparently this format is just not one that I am particularly skilled at. And what I'm going to do now is run through the games that I've played for your entertainment. You can hopefully, if you're interested in the format, you can take whatever lessons you can draw from my quest to 3-0 and apply it to your similar if that's something that you're interested in doing. And for the rest, hopefully you're entertained. So I'm going to start with the very first set after the last video that I posted of Vintage Cube. And this will probably wrap up Vintage Cube for me until the next iteration, because I don't care much for this version. In my opinion, there are too many explosive plays possible with too few ways to stop them. So there's just not enough counter spells. There's discard, sure, but still pretty rough. Anyway, I don't remember exactly the contents of these decks. I will try to pause if I get a shuffle effect, but otherwise I want to go through as quickly as I can. So here in the this game, I have what I consider to be a pretty solid draw, because I'm going to be able to tempo slow my opponent down and then really slow him down under an orb. He decides not to go with the Young Pyromancer, which was probably wise given my hand, though that's more of a hindsight thing. I decided that I'd prefer to fake having a counter than to leave Swords to Plowshares mana up here. So because end of turn Swords to Plowshares using a land under Winter Orb is not particularly strong. Alright, so I drew a Moat, which is pretty good against Young Pyromancer. So I'm just going to actually make more creatures because I'm not super worried about the Pyromancer right now, not with the hand that I have, and I want to close the game out as quickly as I can. Opponent get probes me for a creature, so the jig is up as far as keeping secrets goes about what I might be planning to do. I'm going to mash for some damage, and therefore I'll play the Moat. So one of the things that you want to try to do under an orb is use all of your artifact mana every turn and as few of your lands every turn as you can, unless all of your lands are untapped, in which case you want to use exactly one. Alright, so you know things are going well when your opponent has to Chain Lightning a 1/1 flyer while Winter Orbed. Go ahead and take out his 3/4, continue to press. So far I haven't had a turn where I've missed using that Mox Diamond. It's been quite joyful. Alright. Send in for even more damage and get the sword down. And at this point, my opponent's really just had enough. Nice thing about sword, of course, is that the sower will eventually come into play if he did find a way to deal with the board, and then that's a very solid, like a control magic that you can repeatedly pick up is pretty solid. So we move into game 2. And I believe this one goes very similarly. Yeah, so this is like an attempt at a pure control deck, well, tempo control deck. Well, I drew Fire Ice, which is fantastic, not only because I have Winter Orb in my hand, but because I have Force of Will, and so this gives me the option to use either. So I'm not in any rush if my opponent isn't right now, at any rate. He's drawing some extra cards there, throws away a Jitte, which is interesting considering he knows I was kicking his butt with tokens. Plays a Time Walk that I feel like is a bit of a waste there. I'm going to try to school him later on proper use of Time Walk. So I end up, because I have Swords of Plowshares and Moat in my hand, I go ahead and force with the Control Magic that I never played last round anyway to stop his Chandra. And because this acts like, I could be saving the Ice for Winter Orb, but because it's going to act like a Time Walk in the sense of tapping my opponent's land sets him back sets him back an entire turn. If he wants to make a play, I go ahead and ice his land there. Also, I wanted to hit a land drop. So I did, and I found Lingering Souls. So I'm going to go ahead and play the Souls. Wonder if he's missing his Jitte yet. Or Jitte. Well, maybe not. He gets a Hunt Master out, but I do have the solution for that problem. Alright, so I'm going to send in some damage because even though I'm behind on life and this is a race I would lose, I have the solution. I have to take even more damage here to counter his Swift Spear. but I have the solution already in the graveyard in the form of Lingering Souls. So I want to press and end the game before my opponent finds a way to get out of this, since I have no counter magic in my hand. So I could double block here, but actually my opponent, it's going to be a long time before that actually becomes lethal. And meanwhile, I do have Moat in my hand. So I think I'd rather just push, and we'll go ahead and race. So he dies in, so in over the next 4 turns, that thing will deal 8 to me, which is still out of lightning bolt range. And he would take 16, which is game win. So I don't plan to do a trade here, and luckily I actually find land. And then in thinking about it, as much as I wanted to play them out, I realized that a better play for me is actually Linvala. Both of them stop him from attacking, but one of them closes the game even faster. When it has Traverse and he finds himself a Tundra. He then plays his Tundra and casts Manic Vandal. So he gets rid of the Winter Orb. And now I'm feeling pretty happy, and brainstorm into this gorgeous hand here, which this is how you use a time walk, right? To win the game. It's best. I mean, I'm joking. There's plenty of ways. There's plenty of great ways to use this card, but ideally, if you can get the most out of it, extract the most value, it's going to be to draw an extra card, hit a land drop, and get an attack step, rather than just the first 2. Or one of the 2. I've seen people play Time Walk and even miss a land drop. So, anyway, that worked out real nice. So I move into the next round, feeling pretty good. And I've got a real nice hand here. This deck only ever needs 1 swamp, so I lead off this way specifically because I may want to hard cast the days, and as it turns out, I decide that I do, and I believe this is actually a play that I regret quite a bit down the road. So I don't play Lingering Souls here, which would have been the correct play for tempo. My opponent plays Awakening Zone, a card I very much would have liked to have countered. Oh well. Alright, so he's going to get some spawn, plays an Elder that I don't have to worry about. I'm missing some damage here. So I was thinking, what do I want to do? Flashback to Souls or something else? I decided what I'm going to do is flashback to Souls, but I think the correct play may have been to cast Sower. Most likely my opponent would have sacked the Eldrazi spawn in a land and sacked the Elder, which would have meant I would have got an Eldrazi spawn and been left with a 2/2 flyer and gave him no board presence. And I think that's the same amount of damage in play. And I don't think the Sower, I don't know. Well, we'll see. It could be useful later. I decided I'm going to go ahead and block his Elder here, because if he allows my Spirit to trade with his Elder, then he's down a card, and I'm very happy to trade a Spirit for a random card from my opponent's hand. He gets Grim Lavamancer here. So if I'm going to use Sower, essentially I either need to Treachery that Grim Lavamancer or Sower it now. So I decide I will make the Sower play, because Treachery is much stronger. And I could foresee a potential time where I am able to play Winter Orb and then Treachery to untap my lands. Also, with the Mox Diamond, I threatened to actually use the Grim Lavamancer. Unfortunately, with Dragonlord Atarka coming down, my opponent gets his Grim back, but I top deck pretty good too, so I decide I'm gonna Treachery the Dragonlord rather than the Grim Lavamancer throw down a Baleful Strix to block. So I'm sacrificing the Strix to the Grim Lavamancer, but this play gives me a much better clock. Another play that may have been just wrong, frankly. Alright, well, this is kind of nice. I did draw a Linvala, so I can prevent him from sacking Eldrazi spawn here. And I can also stop him from using the Grim Lavamancer. He abrades, and then, so I go for the Linvala. He actually does not Grim in response, which was awesome. So my opponent misplayed there, basically. And it turns out not to matter. He's got opposition. And I'll spare you the pain of the rest of this game, but I get opposition locked and lose. He just keeps making more and more guys, and I eat it. Alright, so round 3. So very frustrated that I did not counter the correct card. So in this game, I'm hoping not to make the same mistake, and I've got a heck of a draw. Alright, so however, there aren't a ton of ways that I can deal with the flipped thing in the ice. So despite the fact that I had intended to save that play there, I decide that's not what I'm going to do. Instead, I'm going to ice his land here and stall and hope that I find some counter magic, and I do. So now maybe we're okay. I probably should have went ahead and slammed the Mox down just because my opponent then cannot make a play that and back it up with a Mana Leak. He goes for Mana Gorge or Hydra. I counter that and find a Force of Will. This is definitely the Mox turn though, because having drawn Gideon, I can actually play the Gideon and a land and the Mox, produce a creature, and sit on Mana Drain as well. Alright, so he goes for Hydra. I'm going to go ahead and Mana Drain because I have the Force of Will. And rip a very nice Thoughtseize, taking out Glorybringer, leaving him with a Braid, Dragonlord, Atarka, Venser, and Mystic Confluence. So I'm actually going to have to play around. Like, he's got a pretty good hand, but if he doesn't draw a land, then he can't play any of it. Naturally, of course, he draws a land, so he's got that opened up the way for Venser, Mystic. He can play a Braid, and Dragonlord Atarka is still stuck in his hand for a little while. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and send. The other thing I'm concerned about is this Shelldock Isle. I was trying to hold my remand so that I could remand whatever was under the Shelldock Isle down the road, but that ship sailed a while ago. So obviously here when he tries to bounce 2 tokens and draw a card, pretty good time to Force a Will. We'll get that damage in there and pass. Opponent draws yet another land, starting to get scary, but I'm going to go ahead and ultimate because I know that my opponent's play here is Venser and a Braid potentially. So I decide I want to ultimate now because I drew the Lingering Souls, and the Lingering Souls is a lot of power that I can put into play. And also, by doing it this way, he can't block with Venser and kill my 2/2. So I did get some damage out of him. I could steal him, but I would rather obviously hold the Treachery for Dragonlord Atarka. The other thing is that by doing it this way, when Dragonlord hits the table, which he may if my opponent draws a land, it won't kill many of my guys. You know, he can take out 2 of them. So he does. And just like that, we're going to snag that Dragonlord. He's got no cards in hand. He's still 4 turns away from using the Shelldock, provided he doesn't get card drawing or deck thinning. I get a match for a ton of damage and put a Bitter Blossom into play here. I'm running low on time, but I did manage to aggro my way through that and get a win there. So that was pretty nice. And then, like a champ, a very consistent thing happens, which is that I go and lose in the finals. And this becomes a problem for a very long time. Alright, so round 1. I keep a perfectly playable hand, and it turns into a perfectly garbage hand when my opponent strip mines me right away. I rip, thankfully, a land, but I have no defenses here, and I'm quite concerned. And so I hate to do a wasted time walk here, but I actually have 2 different ways to recur it in this deck. So I decide I'm going to walk and look for a land, and I get exactly what I said earlier. I get no attack step and no land drop out of that. It did allow me to ice and find a land, but it probably would have been wiser last turn if I had iced and then this turn time walked, since ice is almost a time walk. But I also make a huge play here that's probably, I think, cost me the game. And this is what I did wrong. I could have mana drained into the Shackles and then stole the Welder and been just fine. Instead, I tap out for a turn. My opponent hits land drop Mox to ready, and I've got to force it, I believe. I don't think I can answer the Welder, but I don't think I can handle a Welder plus a ready. And now if I had mana drained that into Shackles, I would still have Force of Will in my hand. But without it, I'm in a bad spot here. So I'm going to leave the Welder and play the Mentor because until he gets an artifact in the graveyard, it's not a huge threat. And I need to get some kind of board presence in play, and just hope that he doesn't find a way to kill me with that Welder. But I don't want to. Now that I have a board presence, I don't want to repeat that. I'm going to make another mistake in this game, by the way. It's a very painful game for me to watch in hindsight. All right, so I'm going to send in, and my opponent screws up and just lets me kill his Suicide his Welder and his Hanger back, which is fantastic. So I get to untap Shackles. Chase away a no, Lingering Souls, which is correct, I believe. Play a Tundra, which gives me a third land. And now I get to replay Time Walk using Jace, one of the two ways that I can do it in this deck. The other way being Snapcaster. And this is actually fantastic because I get to attempt to Shackles his Hanger back. He pumps it in response and I fail. I did get a token also off of that. But what it lets me do is take a second turn, and even though I didn't draw land here, I get to Jace shrink his Hanger back and now steal it. Of course, I'm going to play this Mox Diamond and trigger Monastery Mentor. Steal his guy, mess up again and not cast Bitter Blossom. Instead choosing to cast Ophiomancer, which I think is a big mistake. I should have cast Blossom, got another token, pumped up the Monastery Mentor, got a free token next turn, and had a backup play if my opponent had a sweeper. Instead, opponent plays Ballista on 4, tries to clear my board out, not really super effective, and realizes that I don't know what his other option was, but one of them would have been to block before shooting. At this point, he's doomed. He had to shoot the prowess creatures, but he should have left at least the Ballista in play and not killed the Jace most likely. In order to honestly, I don't even know if there's a way for him to have a block out of this, but yeah, it turns out so. I limp my way through that game despite my errors, and we move into game 2. And here I have what feels like a keepable hand. Opponent has a Signet. I draw Plains. Go ahead and play an island and pass. Hoping to do something good here. And he goes for Crucible. Crucible's a bit nerve-wracking because he strip-mined me in the last game, if you remember. So I'm going to go ahead and remand it since I don't really have a use for the mana. And then I play a land here. I could have played Bitter Blossom off the Mox, but I decided to play a land here because any land will get me the second white I need to make this hand good, as well as the black. So I think it'd be better to hold the diamond and wait a bit longer. He goes for Crucible again, and I'm so nervous about what he could have that I don't play what he does have, and that's a mistake. It's really a mistake I'm going to pay for. Also, had I played the Mox Diamond, at least I would have Bitter Blossom tokens running. I could have played it off of the mana drain mana, but I'm not sure that that's a huge deal. I think this was reasonable what I chose to do, but I don't think countering the Crucible is reasonable. Since if he had, again, I'm going to blow the walk because I have multiple recursion for it, but if he had a strip mine, I would have already been strip mined. So now I've got to tap out for Mentor and pass. You know, obviously I'm digging for land. And my opponent sweeps the board, which is probably lethal, but I could recover with a land and a land. I find Daze right on time. Gonna have to throw away an expensive 5-drop that can at least recur. Opponent has even more mana, so maybe he's flooded out. Again, any land will get me Bitter Blossom, but by playing the island, I could Daze if he's got some kind of gigantic play. I don't know, maybe like just a gigantic, you know, draw X cards type of play or something. I'm pitching cards here, got nothing to do with them, and he tinkers out a Sundering Titan. So if I can draw a land, again, this is the song and dance for the entire game. And here I made an error. I should have played Mox there because then when I plow the Titan, it wouldn't kill my Plains. As it turns out, it just doesn't matter. He's got Confluence, and I'm a dead man. So moving to game 3. I think that was a mistake. I should have, on the turn when he played the Titan, I should have just slammed Mox and plowed it right away. I would have lost the game anyway, I think, but I would have had a much better shot at it. So here's a great hand, right? I get to spin out early. I mean, this is near perfect. I've got defense against things that might get tinkered out. I'm not brainstorming because I really have no reason to. My hand is fine, and I'm just going to maximize the value like that. So now I'm going to go ahead and brainstorm. And I change out a few cards for the ones that you see there. And I think I make a mistake here. And this is all about mistakes. So I don't remand this. And I don't remand it because I know I have mana coming. And I'm not super worried about, like, he kills one land, is whoop-de-doo, and then I should be okay. So decide, you know, I'm going to shuffle away the card on top and decide I'm going to go ahead and play Shackles so I can sit on remand still. And now if he pays for the Avalanche Riders, of course I just steal it. Then I would let it die, but he's got a Wasteland and make my life even harder. He leaves the islands, and then goes for a Lodestone Golem, which I'm able to remand into a Daze that could be good. But see, I haven't played, by not playing Linvala ever, I'm sitting here in this situation where I cannot play it now. And then he gets Workshop. Well, maybe not the worst thing. I do have Treachery if I can find some more mana. I also have, I don't know, creatures in here. I mean, I have Linvala if I could find a white. Right, so he gets a Pentad Prism, smashes me for 5. I get Mana Drain, which means that there's a chance that I can be able to play that Treachery if my opponent will give me a target. And because I'm so excited about getting a target, I completely flub. So the correct play here is let the 3/5 hit, steal it with Shackles, and Mana Drain anything my opponent wants to do about that. Use the 3/5 to block this. Of course, I could also sack artifacts, including himself, to go get an artifact and put, you know, a better artifact and put it into play. There's a lot of reasons why this is absolutely absurd. But I Mana Drain that card because I had it in my mind. I was set on, I'm going to Treachery away his Lodestone. Then he tinkers, and I'm like, okay, be like the other guy. Go get Blightsteel. Nope. Tinkers Inkwell Leviathan out. And here I am at 7. Island Walk. I'm doomed. So, totally punted that game about as hard as you can and lost in the finals. All right. So start a new one. And round 1. I'll probably break this up. So I decided to draft a blue-green deck here. I'm going to try to pause it when I fetch, whenever that is. Blue-green-white, I think, or maybe it's a 4-color deck. I don't quite recall. Put in Mall Drifters and passes. I'm going to fetch. Yeah, it's a little bit not the best pause there. Didn't mean for that to happen. But I get a turn 2 Jason. I get to draw a card. My opponent's looting. Hasn't found any like reanimator targets or anything, so I'm not quite sure what he's doing over there. I'm going to draw some more cards though. And now I can play Rofellos and Tarmogoyf, except I play them in the wrong order. Man, just hosing myself up right and left. Because he might be putting something crazy into play, I'm going to hold the Phantasmal Image and Control Magic combo. Turns out he's got a Boros Signet and he's able to attack my Jace if he wants to, but decides not to because he's trying to protect his Tezzeret. Treachery. Alright, so there's the deck again if you wanted to take a look at it. But I'm going to go ahead and Treachery that Boros Signet, untap all my lands, smash his Tezzeret with Tarmogoyf, draw an extra card, get Rofellos down, probably copy the Boros Signet, but at any rate, things were looking pretty good. My opponent agreed. He scooped it up. We moved around, or game 2. Despite my many errors and using my mana and such, and this is a pretty amazing hand here. It's got essentially everything you could want in this sort of deck, other than counter magic, but I am able to disenchant a Grim Monolith. I sideboarded the disenchant in against him, and I think that was, I mean, it bought me a ton of time. This time I correctly deploy Rofellos into Sylvan, not Tarmogoyf, because Sylvan's insane. My opponent has no land drop, was banking on Grim Monolith into something brutal, and scoops to the board here. I'm about to draw 3 cards, of course, and then we're off to the races. So, very quick second game against J. Cruz. I go ahead and play Mass Mackles. Moss Mackles? More Mackles? I don't know. Anyway, so here's a pretty good hand. I've got Dragon Lord if I can get the big mana going, and I drop deck a Gray's Cradle, so turn one Mother of Runes. My opponent's got a Workshop draw, though, so that's also pretty scary, but so far he's not doing anything too savage with it. So he goes turn 2 Jace. I'm going to go ahead and copy the Jace, and I actually have no idea, so I can't use Mother of Runes on the copy, and I have literally no idea what's going to happen if I flip the Jace. So before I made that play, I went online and I looked it up, and what it said was, what I found was not from the official website. I couldn't find anything on Gather, or maybe I just didn't look correctly. But at any rate, what I found said the Jace will be unable to flip because it has no text on the back side. That is completely incorrect, and I'm going to pay for reading the wrong answer here quite soon. So it turns out that this play was nice, though, for me because of the Tangle Wire. So first thing I'm going to do is loot away the dragon, because despite the fact that I've got a lot of possible mana in my hand, it's still a long way off, and I don't want to sit there with a card that slow against a deck that looks like it is a stacks control deck. Opponent loots Upheaval. I mean, he's throwing away Balance, Upheaval, and Tangle Wire. So that's a pretty telling series of cards, and sure enough, there's a smokestack. Okay, so I'm going to fetch. I should have paused it there, but if you want to back up and take a look, you can get the deck list again. I'll go ahead and loot in response to Tangle Wire and tap down 3 permanents exactly, allowing me to cast Cradle into Crucible. Crucible being a pretty good anti-smokestack card, and a way to stop myself from flipping this Jace unnecessarily. All right, so my opponent's going to do Tangle Wire smokestack tricks. Loots away another Plains, which is odd. Maybe Balance was a splash card, and he just doesn't need white much. And then he makes, what does he play? I think Mind Twist? Yeah, Mind Twist. Takes away Consecrated Sphinx, Mana Leak, and a Jace. Super, super painful. Alright, so I'm going to have to tap a couple of cards. It also means that Jace will, quote-unquote, flip. Well, you'll see what'll happen. I have to tap 2 and sack, so I stack them, in the right order so that it's less painful. I've got Crucible, so I'm going to be able to do something with that. So I flip Jace and find out what happens. And what happens is he exiles himself. He exiles himself to transform, but there's no text on the back because he's a copy, and he just stays gone forever. Super painful. It actually cost me a mana source, that incorrect ruling, and it also cost me a permanent in a game where the permanents on board matter quite a bit. All right, so I got a Spellskite down. I'm going to pass for the turn. My opponent basically unaffected by the Tangle Wire and the smokestack there. Excuse me for the yawning. Goes ahead and Jace's, loots with Jace and flips it. And then makes a fairly big play, Batterskull, but it's not really the worst. He tries to Jace and I force him to target my Spellskite. I could have protected my guy with Mother of Runes, but I don't want to tap Mother of Runes if I can help it, since my opponent might have instant speed removal. Alright, so now I'm up to sacking 2 permanents, so I'm going to kill 2 lands. I draw a Mox. Very unfortunate at this moment. But I finally decide, well, I've got Spellskite anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and give Tarmogoyf protection from black, and I'm going to go spank that Jace. He's exactly a 6/7. If he was 1 smaller, I could have, if Tangle Wire weren't in the graveyard, if there are no artifacts, I could have actually played the Mox here and let it die in order to pump him. But I don't have to make that extreme play here, fortunately. Alright. My opponent sacks a land in a... he's going for smokestack board clear here, and he's got more cards in hand, so under the assumption, I suppose, that he's going to end up the victor in the long run. He's continuing to, even though he's going for board clear, what he's trying to do is actually deploy more permanents in me because he's got way more mana, and then pinch out my ability to keep up with the stack, at which point I sack all my stuff, and then he sacks off the smokestack, leaving, theoretically a couple of permanents in play on his side and nothing relevant on my side, at which point he would win. I'll go ahead and take 4 from the germ. But it's a good theory, but I do have Crucible. So I go ahead and sack all my lands here, I believe, with the intention of replaying Gaia's Cradle. And then I draw a position, feeling a little bit bad about that decision, but on the other hand, each of my creatures is a mana source as well, so I go and attack with Tarmogoyf because I can block with Mother of Runes and go pro-black. Since I see what's happening over there, with Spellskite, I'm just not expecting that I'm going to need to give a creature protection on my side of the board for anything other than preventing damage, and I want to try to pressure my opponent in some way. Opponent shrinks Tarmogoyf using Treasure Cruise. I'm going to go ahead and block with Spellskite here, pro black, no problems. Alright, so upkeep, I go ahead and use Mother of Runes, giving Tarmogoyf pro black, and then I'm going to sack Mother of Runes, Hallowed Fountains, and Spellskite, which will pump up Tarmogoyf. I get a Hallowed Fountain and I draw a land. So I decide not to attack with my pro black Tarmogoyf here, only because it'll take my opponent to 12, sure, but then my opponent will attack me back for 4. He'll go back to 16. I'll go to 8. That's not really too good. So I decide, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to play my Mox and be done. So what I've done here is if my opponent sacks 3 permanents and one of them is a smokestack, I can sack 3 permanents and keep my Crucible, and I can rebuild. So that's exactly what he does. He's got a Worn Power Stone and a 4/4, and he's gonna gamble that that's good enough. But because, I mean, if he didn't sack the smokestack, so if he had added a counter, then on this turn it wouldn't have been great. I would have lost everything. But on the next turn, he would have lost everything, so that would have been fine. I think that he probably should have added a counter given that he had a land in hand, but maybe he drew the land for the turn. At any rate, this board position that he left me in is actually extremely strong, and it turns out to be even better as I drew Xenagos there, and I'm a turn away from that. I drew Chase off the top. Alright, so we're going to go Xenagos, which is going to allow me to produce more permanents, which will make Cradle stronger. I'm still not attacking because this isn't a good trade. I go ahead and play Cradle into Growing Rites of Itlimoc, finding a Deranged Hermit, and casting a opposition. Now I'm going to tap down a bunch of my opponent's mana, and I've got Xenagos pumping out creatures. Because I have just found a Hermit, he Time Twisters in Desperation. Attacks with the Germ. I totally screw up. As soon as he entered his attack step, I should have tapped it. But I was thinking my Tarmogoyf is huge. I forgot the effect on Time Twister. So many mistakes were made here. I end up chump blocking with Tarmogoyf to protect Xenagos because it's a token maker with opposition. So I lost to Tarmogoyf because of that error. I do tap his Germ though, so I can attack for damage if I want to, which is highly, highly unlikely. But it's an option. Alright, so Xenagos, I'm going to go ahead and fetch. Deathrite, Mother of Runes, makes my Cradle generate a ton of mana, which I use to play Dragon Lord of Tarka. And finally, I flip Itlimoc, so I've got double Gaia's Cradle in play, and I'm opposition locking my opponent down pretty hard. And at this point, he finally, Masmakals there finally gives in, and I don't know if that was game 2 or 3, so I'm just going to move to 3. Hopefully I didn't skip one, but if I did, I apologize. Alright, so I have to mulligan early, and I'm very low on time. But I've got Disenchant in my hand, and because he's playing a stack and he's got tons of targets, I decided I'm gonna go ahead and keep. So I kill an artifact there. He gets a Jace down. Luckily, I top deck like a champ, and I'm able to cast my Jace. So I cast my 4-drop Jace, and he gives me the piles of this or this. So given those 2 piles, I decide to take opposition. It's a stronger card, even though Xenagos had a lot of value there. But my opponent's at 2 minutes and 36 seconds, so I did skip one. Basically, the second game was a drawn-out game, but my opponent managed to, put me away. And then the third one here, and I think he killed me with a Wormcoil Engine, if I remember correctly. But in the third one here, it's a race against time. And so I actually am playing very aggressively to win the actual war, which is the clock. But I can still draw some cards and do some good things. So I go ahead and do that. He puts a counter on Smokestack, I believe. I plussed to shrink his guys so that the Kite Sail can't really do anything. Plus the big Jace and subtracted from the baby Jace, or the littler Jace, rather. Original Jace. Alright, so my opponent plays Kite Sail, and in response to the effect, I could actually Nature's Claim the Kite Sail, but I decided kill the Smokestack because Smokestack's really good at eating time. It ate a bunch of his time and not mine. Again, this big Jace will pin down all of his creatures, and the little one will continue to draw me cards if I wanted. I can also play the Drained Tournament, or I can sit on Confluence. And if we had a game where there was a lot of time, I probably would have just sat on Confluence and took it easy and just let my Jaces win the game for me. But in this shorter clocked game, I probably would have slammed the Hermit and passed, hoping to win with time, but also trying to win with pressure if I could. At this point in the game, though, my opponent recognizes that with a minute between us, he's not getting through for damage, and so he scoops it up. So very interesting set of 3 there, and we move into the finals. I play against Terry Heinz. And I have to mulligan right away, but this is a good hand, especially with the fetch land right on top. So Inquisition's away Tarmogoyf, but doesn't realize that I have a fetch land on top, and so that actually ends up allowing me to get Bayou. So the fetch land actually will fetch both Bayou and Hollowed Fountain, so it's my best fetch, but I have another fetch in here that will fetch almost... no, it's my second best fetch. My other fetch land will actually fetch all 5 colors. So Rofellos unfortunately did not live, but so I didn't get to go with an early Atarka, but I do get a Jace here, and I decide if he's sticking claim by itself, he probably really wants to play a target that I can hit with the claim. But on the other hand, I've got a 7-drop in my hand, and I'd love to have both mana and a way to protect it long term, so I end up selecting those. He Imperial Seals and does not directly make a play that appears to be an artifact or enchantment. And he plays Bazaar, and I'm thinking, okay, well, so it was a reanimation card that he wanted to do. He actually exhumes, which is interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and get the Rofellos back out, I believe, or the Tarmogoyf. Yeah, Tarm. So he sneaks an Iona out and chooses green, which is slightly unfortunate due to the Dragon Lord in my hand. But on the other hand, green against a blue deck is also a little bit curious. So I go ahead and copy Iona right off the top of my deck and choose black, and I'm not quite sure how my opponent is going to get out of this one. I go ahead and Wasteland his Bazaar, and then I plus up the Jace. So if he were to attack, his guy becomes a 6/7. I'll block with my 7/7. So he's not going to be able to attack, and he can't play any black cards, and his deck is clearly mono black. So given that, he just gives up, which makes a ton of sense. And we move on to round 2. So I'm feeling really good here, and then the curse strikes. All right, I've got a Sylvan, so as long as it doesn't get stolen from my hand, I probably win just with the Sylvan. Or so I thought. My opponent instead entombs Iona, plays Iona names blue. I'm going to go ahead and try to find a solution with Sylvan. He plays Una's Prowler. I don't see one. Going to try to shuffle with Windswept Teeth. Look again. I'm going to take a bunch of damage. I'm going to go ahead and shrink Una to stall for time here. And in my opponent's turn, I search. You can take a look at the deck there. And Sylvan does not find anything useful at all, and I die. So basically turn 2 kill. He just went land, end of turn entomb, reanimate, dead. Exactly why I think Entomb is a ridiculous card. Alright, so I have to mulligan, but this seems keepable. I've got a opposition on top if I want it. I've got a Nature's Claim if he tries to do something like a reanimation spell that, you know, like a animate dead type effect. Alright, so I'm going to Growing Rights into Consecrated Sphinx. Really nice. Everything's looking pretty solid here. The ultimate price is the Hierarch, which is definitely problematic for me, but okay. I draw a double blue card that would have been amazing to slam. And then cheats out a Trastodon, not using any way to disenchant. And I lose 2 lands. And I'll save you time. That's the end of the game. I die. Death to Reanimator. Very, very common in this format, and also pretty doggone frustrating. So I think the next one I go is the one where I actually scrub out, and then from there it's all after Azuri, which I don't think is super worthwhile to go through because it was just a bad deck. And then from there it's all 2-0s until or was that Azuri? Yeah, that was, yeah, that's right. And then from there it's all 2-0s or 2 1s until the last one where I actually win. So I'm going to move on. The one I scrub out on, I don't remember what happened. I just think I drafted it. I remember drafting a deck that had basically nothing came together at all, and I ended up looking at it with a complete pile and saying, well, if I win any game, I'll be lucky with this thing, because cards that I needed to wheel didn't wheel, cards that I needed to see I didn't see. It just wasn't good. All right, so this hand is great. Playing against red, it's not like incredible against red, but it's very solid. And I have 2 really good threats for my opponent. Like if he wants to burn these cards off, I come out ahead if his game plan is mostly burn. Drew a brainstorm, which is fantastic. So I brainstorm into a Dragonlord Dramoka, which I then shell dock and play and equip a Skull Clamp, because my opponent has a response. I'll get a creature out of that, drawing a card off Jace. And he, on his turn, compulsive researches. Wrong way, Augur, Bolus, Mystical Tutor. So I'm starting to think, okay, he's playing combo, and he's probably playing Kiki-Jiki combo. At least that's usually what those colors indicate. Alright, so I go ahead and kill the Jace, and I find Caracas, which is great. So if he's playing Kiki-Jiki combo, I have it addressed in my hand. So I'm going to go ahead and play Muldrifter here. Trying to dig for the Shelldock Isle, so I'm willing to sacrifice it. And also because I was looking for a counterspell, and luckily enough I do find one. Alright, so opponent's just doing top stuff. And I fetch land, and my opponent finds his strip mine 1 turn before I can actually take advantage of the Shelldock Isle here. I'm literally 1 card away. If I'd have played Search for Tomorrow last turn or something, I don't know what I would have had to do different, but I would have been able to flip. And then he makes the play of Jace, and I'm really happy for that. He strip mined, and it sucks that I lost the free Dragonlord, but I can go ahead and Search for Tomorrow, get a land into play, and then play a Caracas and bounces Jace and press for more damage, and now he's stuck with a Jace he can't use and no strip mine, which is kind of cool. Alright. At some point I'm assuming he's going to kill that voice, and he finally does with Exquisite Firecraft, which draws me 2 cards and gives me a creature that I could clamp for 2 more cards if I want to. Or just, you know, smash his face in since he's at 8. Alright, so draw an opposition. In general, you'll see similar trends amongst decks. My opponent tries to Spell Pierce it. It's a little odd there. Go ahead and pay the mana. I did misplay though by not fetching first. I thought I had another white source. I had realized that I had drawn both, so I don't get to play Mother of Runes here. And I would very much like to tap 2 of his colored mana during his upkeep and not 1. My opponent ends up balancing, so after some consideration, I'm going to lose some cards in hand, but I end up figuring out that I'm going to keep all the action cards, get rid of some mana, and I lose a creature. Bummer, but, you know, it'll be alright. So I get Mother of Runes down, and I've drawn another counterspell, so double counterspell oppositions. Looking pretty good, and I can even Skull Clamp Mother Runes if I need a card. Opponent tries to plow her, so instead I try to make this tech play and Beast Within her in response. So that's going to continue to give me a creature, and I don't have to waste a counterspell on the plow. It gives me value. My opponent plays a Shelldock Island of his own, uses Shackles, but that's fine. At the end of my opponent's turn, tap one of his lands, drew a Strip Mine awesomely, killing his Shackles the turn, or his Shelldock the turn before he gets to use it. And now, because of the Beast Within play, I can actually smash for half my opponent's life total in 1 hit, taking him to 4 and threatening to win the game next turn. Opponent tries to path, I'm going to counterspell it. I've got mana drain still. And at that point, my opponent gives up, and I get the win there. It's kind of an interesting and hard-fought victory against Thagrius. We move into round 2. So, of course, if I have Disenchants, I'll most likely bring him in. Well, I don't know if I would. I guess he didn't really have that many targets. Anyway, I have a excellent hand. First turn Mother of Runes. I've got turn 2 counterspell potentially, and then I've got Brainstorm and a fetch. Opponent abrades the Mother of Runes, so I am going to sit on counterspell. Tries a Jace, and I'm going to attempt to counter. Hope it doesn't get spell pierced. It does not. It's going to draw for the turn. Let's play an island and a Mox and just pass, because I had thought I was going to go Brainstorm Fetchland, but now I'm sitting on Cryptic Command. So if I were to have played a Fetchland here and I needed to Cryptic, then I would lose the ability to go Brainstorm Fetch. The other thing is my hand's effectively perfect, so I don't want to... I want to brainstorm when I have cards that I don't want. I want to turn them into better cards. Alright, so I'm still chilling on the Cryptic Command. My opponent's hitting land drops, and we're just playing a little draw go here. Alright, so there's a card I don't want. So after combat, I'm going to go ahead and brainstorm. Unfortunately, my opponent has a response of Fact or Fiction, so I'm going to have to fetch before the brainstorm resolves. But I do get to Cryptic Command the Fact or Fiction, and then I find myself a Strip Mine and a Daze. So because of that, I'm going to go ahead and play the Strip Mine, and I end up deciding, I don't know why I decided to pass here rather than activate the Strip Mine. What was the thought process involved here? I certainly wish I had played the Strip Mine effect here on his planes. I'm not sure at all why I would have made that play. It must have been because the top of my deck was something... Okay, so this is why. So I wanted to play this Muldrifter play into hopefully hitting a land, and then, oh, maybe I knew I had a land because of the brainstorm. So I wanted to do the Muldrifter into Skull Clamp Equip and pass. So that was the reasoning there. And with the Daze up, my opponent wouldn't be able to spell pierce it. Alright, so Muldrifter with a Skull Clamp on it is just so many cards of value. Of course, this guy's got a lot of Swords to Plowshares effects, and he may decide that it's worthwhile to utilize one on that Muldrifter. So he starts digging with Compulsive and top, and actually goes for a Balance, which is perfect. Spends his mana perfectly, allowing me to Daze this late in the game. I am going to chump block the Flyer and draw extra cards. And now I get to play Signet into Control Magic Pass. And I'm sitting on a Spell Pierce, so I'm not going to clamp that thing. One has no place, so now I'll clamp it and smash him for 6. It's a third of his life, so the clock is incredibly fast and thus worthwhile. And just to add pressure, I go ahead and play Thragtusk as well. So I've got 11 points of damage in play. It's still the same clock, but if my opponent sweeps the board, then I can continue to attack, and I can hit him for a third of his life again by moving the Skull Clamp over the 3/3. And since I would draw cards and get a beast, a board clear effect wouldn't really be the greatest thing for my opponent here. And it might even be something I could spell pierce. So, for example, the other option is, the other reason to play Thragtusk is if he had some way to go, say, Upheaval, and I couldn't spell pierce it if he went like Mana Crypt Upheaval, then of course I would float blue and pierce the crypt on the way down, but I would still get a 3/3 beast. And so anyway, so that was the thought process there. So Thagrius loses in ironic fashion to a Thragrius. Anyway, all right, I'm just being silly. So I'm playing against Jono Nodius here. And I've got another very strong early Spell Pierce in the Daze. So definitely got, like, in the last couple of rounds, I definitely got all the counters I could want, or certainly quite a few. So my initial, like, gripe, I guess you could say, did not really apply to these games. And you notice I'm still having a tough time because there's just so much that you have to address. Opponent of Vampiric Tutors, and because he may be having mana problems, I've already stopped the Draga Tree Speaker. I actually decided to counter the Vamp. He hit a land drop though, so it could turn out to be that was a waste. But then again, it's also possible I never hit a point in the game where I have a target. Alright, so he plays Elves of Deep Shadows, so maybe better off to have made that play exactly as I did. So I go ahead and play a land. I've got Mystic Snake now, so I'm done. He goes for Lingering Souls. If he flashes it back, I'll snake it because that's a little too much probably. But then again, I've got Dragonlord Dramoka. And so I may not really need to worry too much about Lingering Souls here. I'm going to go ahead and play Signet and Caracas off the top of my library, which allows me to still cast Mystic Snake. Makes it a little less obvious that I have it, but since I've been leaving 2 blue up, my opponent should be assuming I have a counterspell regardless. But the Caracas was a really nice rip because it goes great with Dragonlord. Makes him very hard to eliminate. Opponent has a Planeswalker that is going to get Mystic Snaked. And now I'll get that Dragonlord out, and that should solve most of the problems that I have, at least on the board. Opponent can try to kill Dragonlord Dromoka here for tempo, and then I can pick it up, and then he can hit me in the face for some damage. But instead of making that sort of ultimately futile play, he plays Primetime, and I was pretty concerned about what he might be fetching, but it's only mana. I mean, he could be building up for a big Eldrazi play, but regardless, I don't want to find out. So I'm going to go ahead and Control Magic that and smashity smash for 7. Opponent chump blocks, and I gain some life off Dromoka and pass. Play Voice of Resurgence and pass. This deck was pretty neat because it was a lot of anti-blue and blue cards at the same time. So he tries a Declaration in Stone on Dragonlord Dromoka. I do exactly what I was talking about earlier, bounce it with Caracas. I have no plans to play him without a Caracas untapped, unless my opponent finds a way to kill the Caracas. And at this point, I don't know what play he was thinking of making, but he just realizes, okay, yeah, it's over. Primetime's going to smash his face in. Dromoka's going to come back out. It's just all bad all the time. So he scoops it up. I believe we moved to game 2. Alright, so very keepable hand. Not as good as a first turn Noble Hierarch, but I did top deck a Tundra, which makes this hand quite a bit better because I can potentially be using Mystic Snake soon. Draw a Mox Diamond, which is awesome, actually. And so I shell dock a Jace into play, but I end up tucking Skull Clamp, which is kind of unfortunate. One has Fast Spawned into Crucible, so if he gets a Strip Mine, I am dead, dead, dead. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and play what I can and pass, sitting on both Snake and Cryptic. At the end of my opponent's turn, I fear the potential for Strip Mine so much that I go ahead and Cryptic back his artifact, and it actually ends up digging me into a mana drain. So I'm going to go ahead and play Voice here. Excuse me. And pass with 3 blue up, so that if he does find a Strip Mine, he doesn't get to Strip Mine and then play the card. Alright, so I'm going to Brainstorm. I'll go ahead and hit some mana drops. I got rid of the Delve card for now because I may be able to mana drain into it, and otherwise I just want to keep hitting land drops. He plays an Azorius Signet. I probably should have just countered that because, you know, he's been missing land drops, but then again, I only have 2 counters, and if I counter that artifact, it's possibly sandbagging, and then I could end up paying a pretty heavy price, if that being the case. Alright, so at this point, since he hasn't drawn the Strip Mine yet, I'm going to bank on him not doing so for one more turn, and I'm going to go ahead and play this Mole Drifter, leaving exactly Island and Mox up, so it has to be Strip Mine, not Wasteland. Find a Beast Within and dig through time. My opponent goes for Crucible, and I'm going to decide, after some serious soul searching, I guess you could say, that if he had a Strip Mine, he would have played it. So I'm going to try to beat him before he finds it, because I have a Beast Within in my hand. So if he didn't draw it right there, I can kill that thing with Beast Within. And anything I can kill rather than counter, I would rather kill rather than counter. So I let it go. Find a Dragonlord Dromoka. I'm going to go ahead and send in for some more damage and pass. So I've got the Beast Within. My opponent goes, wait, if he goes Strip Mine, sack the Strip Mine, then in response, I can Beast Within the Crucible. The Strip Mine will be on the stack, so we won't be able to play it from the graveyard in response at that point because something's on the stack and you have to play it when the stack is clear. So basically, I don't have to play the Beast Within just yet. I can chill out, and if he draws a Strip Mine, then I'll play it in response to the first effect. So he goes for a giant green sun zenith. That's a pretty good mana drain target. I have 21 cards in my library also, so I'm soon to be able to get this Jace Balurn into play. And because I actually have a pretty good window here as well to cast Dig Through Time, so I go ahead and make that play. And I find my own Strip Mine as well as a Kazali Pride Mage to clear out that Crucible. So feeling pretty good now. I'm going to go ahead and cast my big guy off the mana drain mana. And free Jace. And I actually still have the Beast Within play, but I also have Mystic Snake up right now. So with those two things, I decide I'm going to pass one more time, and then after that, the Crucible's dead. Meanwhile, of course, my opponent's got a lot of pressure here. He uses a Bazaar of Baghdad. If he finds a Strip Mine here, he can actually go off because Fastbond lets you play it from the graveyard. He didn't discard one. He plays a Recurring Nightmare and an Unburial Rites and then just gives up. He only has 2 cards in hand, so if you were to have made a play here, I get to Mystic Snake it. And then on my turn, I'm going to strip away his Bazaar. Most likely is too risky. I don't know. Maybe I take the Forest out. Regardless, I'm going to kill the Crucible with Kazali Pride Mage and actually kill him off with the Flyer, so it won't matter anyway. Alright, so. And then I get to the finals and I get to play against Moose Plural. And the Curse strikes. So I mulligan away a 6-land Dramoka hand. It's way too slow for this format. And mulligan into 2 counterspells, including a Mana Drain, and a first turn Shelldock that tucks a Eternal Witness. So this looks real nice here. I don't have to play the Golgari Signet. I could Mana Drain into it. But because I draw Spell Pierce on the next turn, I go ahead and I do play it. Opponent has a Mana Drain for that, which I get to Pierce. Very nice. There. It opens a window up for him to make a play. He does not have a way to capitalize on it. I'm not punished for it, so we get to keep going with this game. But I do miss a land drop. Okay, there we go. I hit one now. What I'm missing here is more blue, so I can't play Jace Balurn and still leave counter magic up. So that's a bit of a problem. My opponent goes for a Pestermite, and because I do, so obviously this is Kiki Jiki combo, and because I have an opportunity to counter it and keep it off the board, and then not be like a total dog to some way that he could, you know, Splinter Twin it or something and beat me. So I go ahead and counter now, and I had Beast Within as a backup plan. If he fought the counter war over that and he won, then tried to go off, I could Beast Within in response. Instead he plays Tamio and attempts to tap one of my things, and I try to get tricky here, and I think this costs me. So I kill the thing he taps, or I kill one of my permanents, cast a Voice, and smash Tamio to 2. All I had to do was just kill Tamio, and I was totally set here. Now my opponent's got a Jace Balurn, and he can tap my beast, and I can't kill Tamio again. Okay. So I've got to kill Jace, right? I can't have him drawing 2 cards per turn, but I can't really make a play here either. Opponent taps my beast. At the end of his turn, I'm going to go ahead and attempt for a big dig. It does land, so I get more mana, which I need extra blue because of the Tamio. And I'm going to attack. But my opponent can actually make a Wandering Fumarole and just block. So he does. He might flip it, he might not. Decides not to. Okay, after combat, I'm going to have to cast Muldrifter so I can try to kill Tamio, which means I have to tap out again. And my opponent gets a Mox Pearl into Deceiver Exarch, untaps a land, and Kiki Jiki's me. And I was doing the math on could he actually kill me next turn, and I thought the answer was no. But as it turned out, I didn't account for untapping a land off of the effect. And I think did he play a land this turn and a Mox? Or just a Mox? Yeah, he drew 2 cards with Tamio's ability and drew into the Pearl Exarch Kiki combo somehow. Don't know which pieces he was missing, but there I go, throwing a game away that was mine to win. All I had to do is just be patient, and eventually I would have got it. So round 2, I mulligan and I hide a Mystic Snake under a Shelldock, which is a pretty nice thing. And now turn 2, I've got Mana Drain into Golgari Signet potentially. Or I could just cast the Golgari Signet and then sit on Mana Drain going forward. So I, of course, make the idiot play of Golgari Signet pass against a deck that, very well could be just tinkering me out of the game here. Instead, he plays Jace, which is almost as bad, definitely a problem. So I think, okay, well, although that's bad, I might be able to deal with it using Voice of Resurgence now that I put myself in a bad spot. And if he does tinker into a creature, I can control magic it. So I'm going to tap out again. What's the worst that could happen? Well, how about Swords to Plowshares on my guy? Draw a card, Dack Fade in my artifact mana, and pass. And I'm going to save you the trouble. I have completely thrown away 2 games in the finals, and I lose to the curse. All right, so I try again. Sander Vinijic? Anyway. All right, new deck. Look at this savage deck. What a great start, too. What do you do with this start? I think going first, it's 100% Soul Ring into Hypnotic, into Duress, Attack type of thing, I think. Going second, I'm not sure, but because he's playing green, I decided Soul Ring. I need to keep up with his speed. Opponent plays a Courser and is able to hit a land off the top and then plays and reveals a Maelstrom Pulse. So because he's got the Pulse, I feel like I can't... I'm going to have to play the Dynamo here and give him a target. I don't really feel like I can play the Hypnotic Spectre because he's just going to pulse it away. And if he chooses not to pulse for some reason, then I've got the rest. So he's revealing a Eureka over there. That's pretty scary. Pulses away the Dynamo as expected and hits me with the Courser. I did finally draw an island here, which is nice. So I decide, as much as I want to get the Hypnotic Spectre down, I need to Brain Maggot because he's got a Eureka on top of his deck. And I do, and I see Avenger of Zendikar and 2 blanks. So I'm going to take the Avenger and then go ahead and copy the Courser in order to try to improve my my situation here. He hits a land off the top and shows a Murderous Cut. I am able to play a land and gain some life. I have a Metalworker on top of my deck. Not looking too great. Duress away the Eureka that I know he drew for the turn. Still unable to actually get this Hypnotic Spectre on the board despite having turn 1 Swamp, Soul Ring, turn 2 Swamp. And I play Tasigur. Opponent drew the card that he had revealed, which was the Murderous Cut. I played the Tasigur to try to draw it out because I don't want him murderous and cutting the Maggot. I go ahead and activate Tasigur, digging desperately for something that I can use here. I find nothing super good. I get a Worn Power Stone in my hand, smash in for some damage. Opponent Murderous Cuts away Brain Maggot, unfortunately for me. And now his all land hand is awesome because he is Avenger of Zendikar. Guys, I'm looking for a solution here. Find some Greaves. I get to play Glenelendra. Basically, this is getting out of hand and it continues to get out of hand and I lose. So we move into round 2. And I've got a hand that's probably, yeah, it's got to be a mulligan, unfortunately. Into this hand, which could be a keep, but it's highly risky. I need a land on top, followed by another one. So I think I decide to keep it because it's my best hope, and I get a Thoughtseize, but his hand is great. I take a Deathrite Shaman out of his hand, so he's not going to get a turn 1 play, and top deck a Swamp like a champ, so I get to play a Bitter Blossom, but he still has he top decked an Arbor Elf, so he gets to go Arbor Elf Cobra. I draw an Ancient Tomb off the top. How amazing is that? So I get to go Thran Dynamo, Metalworker, pass. But he's going to play Manglehorn. Now I knew he had the Manglehorn, but I figured I'll play the Dynamo. There's no way I can't do much else with it. But if I play the Dynamo and draw an artifact now, I can Metalworker, and I have a lot of artifacts in this deck if you haven't noticed. So, and there's one. So I use the Greaves, and I get to Dark Petition, and I Dark Petition, and unfortunately, it's not like a go get a game-winning card here. So the deck really doesn't have a ton of options. So I go get Hypnotic Spectre and pass for the turn. And my game plan is to hopefully get the Genesis Wave out of his hand before he kills me with it. So he Maelstrom pulses away the Metalworker. So I cannot... I had the mana to play Greaves into Spectre, but now I cannot. He's got 3 cards in hand. Alright, so I Bitter Blossom. And I traded 2 of them for the Manglehorn. Top deck a land, again, like all day top decking lands here, trying desperately to win this game. Go ahead and cast Hypnotic Spectre, Greaves, attack. Hopefully I hit Genesis Wave. I do. I take his Genesis Wave, so he's down to 2 cards, and I actually have a decent board position. And his 2 cards are Primeval Titan. I get to take the last one out of his hand. It's a Terastodon. Yuck. And then I realize that I'm at 7. He's got a Primeval Titan, and I'm dead. What am I going to do here? There's no way for me to win. So, yuck. Just a terrible series of games there. So I go ahead and move on to round 2, trying to do something about that. Try to break even at the very least. Unfortunately, it sucks to lose in round 1 because you already know you can't 3-0. I've got a savage hand here, so I'm going to go ahead and keep. And I think this has no use for the Soul Ring unless I draw something crazy. So this is a first turn Duress, turn 2 Bitter Blossom off of the Soul Ring kind of deal. And I do, and I Duress away Ancestral Recall. Holy smokes! And he's playing Tendrils combo. Very, very good for me. So I get Soul Ring down. I could go Worn Power Stone or Bitter Blossom. I decided to go Power Stone. He has a Force Spike for it, which is not a card that I saw in his hand, so that's what he drew for the turn. But that's not bad for me because I actually really don't need that mana. It just was something I was trying to do. Alright, so I'm now going to repeal my own Soul Ring and go ahead and play Bitter Blossom for the turn. And I do not play Urborg because he's playing combo, and look at what I know is in his hand. So he did draw a Swamp there, so that's why Liliana didn't come down. And I think about it and decide it's going to be too slow. He's going to draw his black eventually. He's got Dark Ritual. Now that he has the black, kind of the jig is up. So I'm going to go Liliana instead and try to just put him away before all is lost. Alright, so Metalworker gets reanimated into play because if I can draw a little bit more, if I can draw an artifact here, I get to slam Karn. And I go ahead and smash. He draws another land, so he's building up for that tempo. Okay, so I get to Metalworker, Sword of Feast and Famine, or just hardcast Karn. I'm definitely going to go Karn and take a card out of his hand, and I exile. So those are the 4 cards in his hand, and I exile a Dark Ritual. Every card in his hand is good, so I felt like the cards in hand were more valuable than hitting a land in play. It's one of the few times. I go ahead and Liliana away a Phantasmal Image, send in for the team. Pass. My opponent cannot beat me, and when I thought seize him and get to take yet another combo piece out of his hand before activating Carmen, taking another combo piece out of his hand, finally he's had enough, and we move on to round 2. And in round 2, I sideboard in even more discard because I actually had more discard in the sideboard that I wasn't using. I go ahead and take out some more creature removal, but I do keep Damnation in case he gets the card that makes a bunch of goblins. And he gets first turn Ancestral. Again, I have Duress for Ancestral, but this time he's going first, so he gets to make the play. This deck also has Black Lotus, by the way. This deck was actually pretty good. But anyway, so I get to Duress him, and I see a bunch of different options here. Ultimately, I decided to take Bargain because it looks like I can't stop his mana, but maybe I can stop what he wants to do with it long enough to win. So he gets a Signet and an Island in play, so the rest... I don't know what he's got. Oh no, Signet and Swamp in place. He's got an Island in hand. And I draw Glenelendra. Phenomenal draw. Best possible creature you can have in play against these combo decks right here. So you get to Glen it out with a Lotus. Alright, so there's the Swamp. So I think he's holding an island right now, actually, as a matter of fact. His hand is Seething Song, Rite of Flame, Force Spike, Island, if I remember correctly. All right, so I draw a Hypnotic. I am not stupid enough to play the Hypnotic, though, and tap out when I've got a Glenelendra in play. My opponent taps mana for absolutely no reason whatsoever and passes. I'm going to go ahead and fetch. Right, so he should be playing the island that I know about. So he's got 2 cards I don't know about at this time. And I fetch an island there because I just want multiple ways to possibly activate Glen in a turn. I draw a Phantasmal Image. So good. So kind of a weird situation. Do I want to play Hypnotic Spectre, or do I want to play Image, or do I want to play nothing? I could wait a turn and then play Hypnotic Spectre. And because I can play Spectre with 2 counterspells up next turn, with 2 islands up, I decided I am going to play the Phantasmal Image now and hope that I didn't just give my opponent the window he needs to beat me. But knowing what's in his hand, it looks like I'm okay. And he's got a Force Spike that I know about and still couldn't have kept me off of blue. So, yep, not punished. All right, so I'm going to send the team. I draw Mox Diamond, so I'd rather have a Mox and get a 3rd blue into play. I'm going to send the team in for 4 and go ahead and cast Hypnotic Spectre here. Opponent has a Force Spike for it, which does tap one of my blue, and I do agree with him making that play. This is his last chance, because if he doesn't win on this turn, obviously triple counterspell Hypnotic Spectre is unbeatable, and perhaps this may have even just been too greedy. Perhaps I should have just sat on triple counterspell. But as it turns out, he doesn't have the win, and we get to add him as Merrick Fiend for good measure, taking away a Wheel of Fortune from him, and yeah, he goes ahead and scoops. This deck just had unlimited amounts of speed counters and discard. It just was not the deck that you want to be facing if you're combo. Unfortunately, just not the deck that's very good at all against. I built it that way because of the way that Vintage plays out. There's a lot of combo and control, and then I lost to creatures in round 1. But we move into round 3 now. I've got a weird hand. It's capable though. It's just not. It's not. It needs something, right? Definitely needed a land, so I drew a Urborg because this Urborg will make Mishra's Workshop actually produce black. And I take a Wheel of Fortune and see Signet, Right, Vampiric, Island, Wheel of Fortune. So I get a Wheel of Fortune, and now I know my opponent is playing combo. So because he's playing combo, I'm going to actually throw this Mox down just in case he does have like a Time Twister. I want to have more mana in play. All right, so he plays the Island I know about and the Signet that I know about. So he's got 1 unknown card in his hand. All right, so I go ahead and play and get the Sword of Feast and Famine down while I can, again, in case he twists. And a Lightning Greaves to go with it, so hopefully I can find a creature here. He vamps, so that's gone. And we're at 1 storm count for the turn. Plays a Badlands, so that's what he ended up getting so he could Painful Truth. So he has Rite of Flame, Island, and 3 unknowns. I really need to draw a creature here, and I do not. That's pretty painful. Alright, plays the Island. But having taken the Wheel of Fortune apparently hurt him pretty bad. Where's a creature? Well, there's Tasigur. He'll do. Unfortunately, Tasigur cannot come down and equip the sword, even if I were to exile all of my graveyard. So I leave the duress there. And I do not Lightning Greaves him. So this was a tech play and a little bit of a gamble, but this was the gamble. I need the sword on it because I need to be taking cards out of this combo player's hand. Plus, I want to untap my lands multiple times so I can activate Tasigur over and over. So if I Greaves him and attack for 4, next turn if I don't draw a creature, I can't move the sword on because it gives Shroud, not Hexproof. So I expect that I should be dead here. My opponent compulsives, throws away a Swamp, and does not find a way to kill me yet. So, alright, I'm going to go ahead and now I can play the Greaves, or I can equip the Greaves, I can play the sword, and I do not play the Bitter Blossom just yet because I'm going to attack, put the sword effect on the stack, tap for mana, untap, tap for more mana, and then activate Tasigur. Maybe there's a play I can make that's better than Bitter Blossom. So I get an Underground Sea out of my opponent's hand, and I end up picking up Damnation is what it gives me, so that's not better. I'm going to go ahead and cast Bitter Blossom and pass. Opponent has, oh, he floated an Ancestral last turn, so yeah, it was last turn. So that feels like I've got forever. I mean, if he's waiting on Ancestral, he'll be dead long before then. He's actually at 9. Alright, so I get a Fairy Rogue. Go ahead and activate Tasigur and see if maybe I can find myself a Hypnotic Spectre or something that I could send in with Lightning Greaves. And I find Thran Dynamo Control Magic. He gives me Control Magic. Alright, so I'm going to send, hit for 6. I go ahead and charge some more mana, untap, and then activate Tasigur again. I get an island from him. I thought I activated it again, but apparently not. That's a little odd. Anyway, well, as it turns out, it doesn't matter. My opponent only has 4 cards in hand. He gets a Shelldock Island. He just basically just bricked. I mean, I should have lost to the combo player there in game 2, but I don't think I would have lost in 3 because that was a very odd game for me where I drew almost no discard despite having tons of it. So I move on to a new event. Hopefully you are not sick of it. Hopefully you are actually entertained. So it's kind of a video you might want to watch in bites. Alright, so I draft. This is a new deck. It's a redraft, and I have a Orzhov Control, I believe, is what it is. Alright, and a great draw. I get to go first turn Impulse. Finding myself a click or him if I want it. I end up taking actually Batterskull. That's a little bit odd. Is that correct? Opponent repeals a Mox Jet. I wonder if we're gonna glitch here. Is that accurate? Oh, maybe the other card was Factor Fiction. I'm not quite sure. Well, anyway, I'm definitely gonna Factor Fiction here with the Yawgmoth's Will. Maybe I took Yawg Will specifically because I have Factor Fiction in my hand. I'm not quite sure how I'm playing this game out. It definitely doesn't feel like the kind of thing that I would normally, kind of choices I would normally make. I Factor Fiction in response to an Ancestral. That I would do. Opponent remands. Gets his Ancestral off. Plays a Bitter Blossom. So this is actually like a very weirdly played game on my part. Doesn't feel too great. Anyway, I did get a Vindicate though, a Bitter Blossom, and my opponent's down to 7 cards in hand, and I still have a Will plus Factor Fiction. So, alright, so he gets a Jace and he just adds some counters to it and doesn't get any cards off it right away, which is really weird. So I'm going to go ahead and Yawg Will now and replay Strip Mine into Vindicate and go ahead and just get rid of that Jace. I was real tempted to just Anguish it and then save so I could do the Strip Vindicate for one of his islands, but decided that I just didn't want him getting cards. He clicks me and decides to take out the Batterskull. So, oh, I remember now. I remember this deck now. This deck only has like 3 win conditions, and Batterskull is one of them. So that's why I ended up taking the Batterskull early, because if I tucked it, I was concerned that I might never get to it. I might not find a way to win. So anyway, Factor Fiction here reveals a Snapcaster, a Plains, which I take, Concealed Courtyard, Mental Misstep, and Factor Fiction, which I do not take. That must have been what I was Factor Fictioning in response to the Ancestral in order to attempt to find. So here I'm going to go ahead and delve and Murderous Cut the Dark Confidant that he played, and go ahead and Strip Mine a Swamp while I'm at it. And I am tapped out, so I can't Force Spike, but my opponent plays a Pack Rat, but I'm doing okay. So I draw a Wasteland. I have Snapcaster Mage, Murderous Cut, Anguish Unmaking. I'm in fairly good shape here. My opponent at the end of my turn uses Pack Rat, pitching a Bone Shredder, and with that happening, I'm going to go ahead and Snapcaster the Factor Fiction and dig. This deck had multiple board sweeps, and there's one of them. So I would rather board sweep I'd rather dig and get cards and board sweep him than have traded a 1-for-1 trade like Anguish Unmaking and tried to play that game. So opponent ends up settling on giving me Wrath of God and an island. I lose a Mox Sapphire, Land Tax, and a Gilded Lotus. Sends in his team. Of course, I'm going to chump block. He's going to decide to pump for damage, I believe, or he decides not to. Yeah, because I mean that's just crazy, right? Against the Wrath of God. All right, so I drew Ravages of War here. So I've got my Mox Jet, but not my Mox Sapphire, and my Gilded Lotus and Land Tax, which would have made the Armageddon much stronger. I'm going to go ahead and Wrath of God though. And if my opponent has a response, I'm hurting a little bit. And he has Dig Through Time in response into Frantic Search. Okay. And nothing. Okay, Wrath of God goes off. Board's clear. Opponent's got 2 cards in hand and plays a tap out for Emrakul. I get to force spike Emrakul, and my opponent gets to take my next turn. And then I don't know what this guy's thinking, but he plays Anguished Unmaking on my Mox. Okay. And then Wrath of God with a Island and Stoneforge in my hand. I mean, Ravages of War. He kills all of his lands, all of my lands, leaving me with the perfect 2 cards to recover. So if I draw a Plains, I go get the Batterskull against an empty board. What kind of madness is this? He should have played Stoneforge and did nothing. Alright, so my turn, I draw Oblivion Ring, no Plains. I draw a Mana Leak, no Plains, but now I can at least Mana Leak. Opponent hasn't drawn a land at all, so he blew up the board with no lands in his own hand. Real crazy. I go ahead and Brainstorm at the end of his turn, and I find a Plains and a Duress. So I get to Duress him, take his Duress out of his hand, leaving him with a bunch of counter spells. And Stoneforge comes down and fetches Batterskull. I have 6 cards in my library. Exactly 6. A little scary. My opponent says LOL. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and Batterskull. I have 5 cards in my library, and I actually played, I feel like I played this game as perfectly as I could at this point. I drew a Mana Crypt, which is fantastic. I get to play Crucible off the top. My opponent attempts to force a Will It. I should have let this go. This really doesn't do anything like important. The important thing is Batterskull. But I'm greedy, and I Mana Leak his Force of Will, so I do get to have the Oblivion Ring, Strip Mine combo going. I'm going to go ahead and smash for 5. Of course, if he doesn't kill the Batterskull right here, I get to untap, and then it's fairly well protected by the bounce. But the problem is I only have 4 cards in library, so losing time, just picking it up, might cost me a game. Fortunately, he does not have anything. I go ahead and him off the top, taking Augur of Bolas and Ashiok. Smash for 5. He does get a land. As soon as he goes into his combat step, I'm strip mining that thing. He Brainstorms in response. In case he actually wanted to play a spell and misclicked into his combat zone. Once we're there, I'm killing that land. I don't want to even give him the chance of moving back to his Bane phase and making the play. And he scoops. Awesome. So that was game 1. Like, kind of, I was pretty proud of it. So I'm going to draw a card, hit him to half his life. Draw a card, hit him to half his life, and have exactly 1 card left in my library with Strip Mine, Crucible, Lock. This deck also having Wastelands is pretty good, so now you see why the control deck is also playing Armageddon. So we move into game 2, or Ravages of War, which is, you know, the same thing. Well, that and also the land tax and the Moxes and stuff. I mean, the deck was designed around that. Opponent Duresses a, speaking of Moxes, Duresses a Mox, but I draw Mana Crypt, and since I do, I go ahead and strip mine his land, because I'm about to, I can pull ahead on mana right here if I want to. I Brainstorm and find Stoneforge, which will give me a shuffle, and my opponent had no land. Strip mine killed him, and we can move on to the next round. Against Ribbons of Night, where the curse strikes. And I lose in 3. So, I don't know why I mulligan that hand away. I cannot understand it at all. It was a perfect hand. And if I remember correctly, I misclicked and then said quite a few bad words. But, yeah, so this is how the game starts off to punish me. So I'm going to just sit on the jet because, well, there's no point in telegraphing and playing a card that he might just disenchant. Geist of St. Traff comes down. I can theoretically get enough mana to actually get on board and then Wrath of God. So I'm going to try to slow my opponent down enough. Not even close to slowing him down. And at that point, when I don't draw, I needed to draw perfect there. I should have O-ringed probably the trinket or just vindicated it, but I mean, it was hopeless. If I vindicated the trinket there and then I drew, like, yeah, it just wasn't happening. So just a terrible, terrible start due to a misclick on do I want to mulligan. That's what I mean about being cursed. So, all right, round two. This is a very playable hand. It is not a phenomenal hand unless Mana Crypt sticks and I don't get Wastelanded, in which case an early Factor Fiction is pretty doggone good, especially with Force Spike in my hand on turn one's exactly where you want Force Spike. I drew a Treasure Cruise to go with that Factor Fiction, so during my opponent's upkeep, I want a Factor Fiction before he gets a chance to draw a Force of Will and before he gets a chance to play a second island for a counterspell. So he ends up splitting like this, and I take Stoneforge Mystic, Watery Grave, easy. Since I'm holding Anguish Unmaking, don't need to Vindicate. He floats a Riftwing Cloudskate. That's not going to be getting it done this game, I don't think. So I'm going to go ahead and play Stoneforge here. I've got mana floating after it. I go get the Batterskull, which is the only win condition in this deck, really. And my opponent has a balance. Wow, what a feel-good Force Spike this was. Then he plays his land. I get to cheat out the Batterskull, and I do it because I'm going to actually cruise anyway. I'm not sure why in the heck I'm holding the Mox Sapphire. Some of this seems like it might be buggy. It doesn't make really a ton of sense what exactly, but all right. Anyway, my opponent has Reflector Mage, so he bounces the Germ. That doesn't really do much here. All right, anyway, I get to him, my opponent, and the other thing I get to do is just pick up the Batterskull and cheat it back down into play. No problems. This is really odd, though. Is this really, like, are we really not bugged? Is this how the game played out? Some of these games, I was pretty tired when I played them, and I'm starting to see why I didn't 3-0, because I see errors in these games for sure. But this looks like a bugged replay. Yeah, I don't think this is playing out correctly. It's asking me for 3 mana. Something's buggy here for sure. Yeah, I don't know what it is. I'm going to go ahead and close it. I did win this game pretty handily, actually. And as I recall, what ended up happening is my opponent was trying to deal with the Batterskull. It just kept coming back into play. And finally, after a bunch of work, I think he finally killed it, and then I Yogg-Willed it back out or something. I can't remember. Anyway, so I've got an interesting start. He's got a Soul Ring. I've got a Land Tax and a Strip Mine and Brainstorm. Brainstorm's awesome. So I'm going to play the tax and hope that he feeds into it. But he's got a Soul Ring, so he probably won't. He plays Blade Splicer. So bad for me. But I top deck Mana Crypt. So I go ahead and Brainstorm and decide to chill out on the Mana Crypt for just a turn, because what I want to do is go Crypt Gilded Lotus. Right, so I'm going to eat some damage here. I do play the Strip Mine, but yeah, now I get to play Wasteland, Crypt, Lotus, him, my opponent, and I get Muldrifter, Cryptic, and he only has 3 cards in hand, so I'm feeling like this is a good spot to be in, but one of the cards was Banishing Light. Okay. I take a beating. I lose a coin flip, I think. No, I win a coin flip. I go ahead and Wasteland him, saving the Strip Mine. Cast a Batterskull. Should be stable now. That him must have been the worst him in the world, because look at this. Removal again. I'm actually taking way too much damage now. Down to 9. I need to win this flip. I do not win the flip. I play Crucible. I've got Snapcaster Mage to chump block, because I'm in chump block mode, but then I won't be able to pick up Batterskull. So I decide instead I'm going to have to actually take the damage, pick up the skull. I have to win the coin flip, get the Batterskull down, not die, and then I have to draw land and Snapcaster and block. All that has to happen, and I win the coin flip, and I don't draw land, but I do draw Oblivion Ring. So I could play Oblivion Ring here and then Snapcaster and block. I won't be able to do Snapcaster Brainstorm or anything, but so I think carefully about how I want to spend the mana, and then realize the way that I have to do this is very painful. So I Snapcaster, Strip Mine my Tundra, replay the Tundra so I can get the O-Ring down to stay in the game. Exile the 3-1. I have to win a coin flip here, and my opponent has another removal spell. Man, I just felt this was one of the most frustrating games, and I think after that I called it, if I remember correctly. Like, I was so frustrated by that. Yeah, there it was, like really early in the morning, 3:20 in the morning, and frustrated to no end by the way that played out. And no, I couldn't even. In fact, I couldn't even call it because I had to finish. But after this, I gave it a rest and moved on for the next day. So I had to finish. So this is round 3. I needed to get, again, I needed to break even. There's a mulligan hand into a definite keep. Opponent duresses me, making it significantly worse, or worse, rather. So now I need to draw a land or I'm in big trouble. I do not. I am in big trouble. He doesn't have a play, but then I draw Mox Sapphire. Phenomenal recovery, so I get to go Stoneforge. And this deck doesn't have any other equipment. So it's just in there for Batterskull. But hey, I've got a Stoneforge down, and I've got Batterskull. And my opponent Maelstrom Pulses. Of course, wise enough to realize that that means I'm holding a Batterskull. I do get a land here, but it comes into play and duresses my opponent for a Thran Dynamo, revealing Force of Will, but no blue card to go with it. I figure my opponent might play, so he plays Island, and then he plays Search for Azcanta. I thought he might play a land and then sit on Force of Will, in which case I could potentially make a Force Spike play. He did not, but having drawn Search for Azcanta, I drew a counter to that in the form of Vindicate, still on Force Spike. He plays a land tapped, which means he's holding Island Force of Will, so he can hard cast it but not soft cast it. So I'm going to attempt to him. He's going to attempt to counter. I'm going to go ahead and spike it and take that last card out of his hand. Alright, so he's empty-handed and I've got a Batterskull. I draw Will, which is awesome. But I'm going to go ahead and play the Batterskull because I do have the Wills, so if this goes wrong, my only win condition, he dazes it. Ouch! And then has no cards in hand. And I draw an amazingly timed Mana Crypt right there. So I get to Yogg Will, play a Mox Jet from the graveyard, recast the Batterskull, and cast a Stoneforge who does not fetch anything. But it gives me the capability to pick up Batterskull and put it back into play with Stoneforge, which is nice, rather than having to cast it against a blue deck. So he doesn't have immediate way to kill it, and now I get to start pushing for some damage. Probably an argument could have been made not to attack with Stoneforge, but because my opponent's at exactly 20 and it shaves an entire turn off, I'm not going to sit back on the capabilities. And here, at this point, my opponent, he can't win with Mana Crypt damage because of the skull, and so he's looking at the board and he just decides to give up and move on to round 2. Because he probably had nothing or nothing useful, and Batterskull does have a way of invalidating quite a bit. Alright, so this is a great hand. My opponent, unfortunately, has a duress yet again. Decides to take the best card in my hand. Very wise of him. I don't draw a Swamp. Alright, so I'm still missing a Swamp, but I don't even have click mana now. I draw Crucible. I was thinking about, do I want to even play it? I decide, yeah, I do. If he has a counter for it, then so be it, because I really have nothing to go with it. But if he doesn't, then I could draw either Strip or Waste and do some really good things. Plus, I have fetches in here. So draw an Impulse, and Impulse into Batterskull, Courtyard, Stoneforge, Swamp. At this point, I really just want a Swamp. So I'm going to go ahead and duress my opponent. And I see Ultimate Price, Beast Within, which I take. Go for the Throat, Swamp, Batterskull. So I leave him with his skull, but interestingly, he didn't Beast Within in response and take out the Crucible. I guess he was hoping I would take that so he could have his Batterskull, but he's not really going to get to keep that Batterskull, so he plays it off his Swamp that I knew about. Finally get a second blue. I'm going to go ahead and just not mess around and just exile the Skull first. Play a land tapped and pass. So he's got Go for the Throat, Ultimate Price, and whatever he drew for the turn, which is an unknown card. He hits me with 3/2, and I drew Ravages of War. So thinking about it here, I decide the play is Ravages, and my opponent just scoops. So Ravages with 1 floating, replay a land, possibly just cast Snapcaster and start smashing, but I think I would have actually held it. I only floated the one because there's no reason not to anymore with the mana leak, with the mana with mana burn gone. So I replay a land, and then I would have replayed Watery Grave, and then on the next turn I play Tundra, and then on the next turn I play whatever land, Snapcaster, duress my opponent, and then after that I get to attack and I get to click, and then ultimately will Crypt, Impulse, and duress him. Well, duress would have been gone, but I don't know. He wasn't going to deal with the Armageddon there. So that's how I closed out that one, and so I said, okay, I've had enough because of the very heartbreaking middle game, and I move the next day, decide to start again, and I end up playing this series against Ryan Carpenter. Well, these are the first two games anyway. And so I draft a control deck, and it looks like this, and play land tax. Well, I tend to like to drafting control decks. One of the reasons I like to play control, obviously, so it's one of the reasons that I enjoy Vintage Cube. Although, as you'll see at the end, I finally give into the dark side here. All right, so I could have slammed in Abyss here, but I'd also have Mystical Tutor, and this is a game that this has probably the best game in the entire series in it, and I'm very much looking forward to showing you this game so you can see what I'm talking about. But here I decide I'm going to go ahead and play the Abyss because I actually don't care about it right now. I don't know what my opponent's playing, but it may not be any good against him. I want to, if he's Reanimator, I want to get it down and have a Mystical Tutor's follow-up. So he is Reanimator, apparently, so he gets a Consecrated and also Vampiric Tutors, which I figure means he's going to get Force of Will. So I'm going to go ahead and Mystical Tutor now because he's going to draw 2 cards from my draw phase. And here you can see this crazy control deck. It was very, very good. All right, but not good enough, as you'll see, obviously. All right, so I Mystical Tutored for balance, so he gets to draw 2 cards. If he did get, I figure, okay, so if he got Force of Will here, I'm going to get Force of Will and another card, and then his Sphinx dies to the Abyss. And if he didn't get Force of Will here, then excellent. So I could I could try to balance and wasteland my land and reduce him by 1 land, but that seemed really, really silly. So I'm just going to play a land and try to get him less cards in hand. But the first thing I want to do before that is bring to light a Time Walk, because what I'm hoping to do is completely Mind Twist him with the balance. So I do Time Walk first into Library. He gets more cards, and hopefully he didn't get Force of Will. Let's see what he got. And he got, well, whatever it isn't Force. It's getting Mind Twisted away. 9 cards and a Consecrated Sphinx. So I'm going to keep my lands. I'm going to select my lands carefully. I'm keeping Library, Savannah, Wasteland, and an island because I have Golgari Signet. I can let the swamp go. And that Wasteland, I have plans for that. Oh, I guess I let the island go as well. And I kept the second white, and I'm not sure why. Oh, because I have land tax. And you'll see why in a moment, obviously. So I just crushed him with that backbreaking play. But he's Reanimator, so it's very easy for him to just quickly recover and do very nasty things, although the Abyss will help me. So at the end of his turn, we're even on lands, and I'm going to Wasteland my Wasteland, which will, of course, fail to hit it because it's already gone. But I am now land tax ready, and I have tax Library going. So I'm going to draw and pass. Unfortunately, I don't have enough basics in here. Like, I've drawn some of them. I mean, I have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in here, but I drew some of them. But I did at least get to tax up so that on the 3rd turn of the Library sitting there, I'm able to go ahead and start librarying myself. All right, so my opponent's just tooling around looking for some sort of solution to the board state as presented, I imagine. Meanwhile, I'm building up monster mana base, and I find myself a Mindslaver, as well as, of course, Sundering Titan. I'm going to start out by slaving the opponent and see what happens. So he does not have a counterspell for it, or if he does, he has a mana leak, and there was no point in using that because I had mana left over. Turns out he doesn't. All right, so this is his hand. So if If he had enough mana or a way to get that Grizzle brand into play there, I could make him pay 7/7 and drop down very precipitously low in life, although ultimately probably not finish him off because you can't make him pay life that he doesn't have. You could make him pay if I can't make him pay 7 life if he's down to say 3, right? Because he just doesn't have 7. He would need a multiple of 7 for that to actually finish him off. So instead, I decide, okay, well, I'm going to win with Upheaval Mirari's Wake, so I'm just going to go ahead and have him make plays here and see what else is in his deck. That's the rest of his deck. So nothing I actually need to fear, and that's what I wanted to know. And I'm going to go ahead and cast Shallow Grave, putting a Consecrated Sphinx into play, and then I'm just going to say done and exile that Consecrated Sphinx. And now that it's my turn, I drew a hanger back, which is amazing. I draw an extra card off library and decide actually that now that I've seen his deck, I actually don't have anything to worry about. So I'm just going to play Sundering Titan and go to town here. And my opponent, Trinket Mage, gets eaten by the Abyss. And at this point, we know he's got a bunch of cards he can't play and a bunch of cards in his deck that don't matter. He has no counter spells in his deck at all, so that helps me out for round 2. And he really doesn't know that he doesn't necessarily know that this is enough Upheaval deck, which could potentially give me an advantage in the games that we're about to play, which, as it turns out, is just this one. All right, so I've got a library draw, so that's almost always a victory if you just draw a library. But when you draw it with a Time Walk, the chances it's a victory go way up. However, as it turns out, so my opponent has Wasteland, so I do get to, draw an extra card here, but then I'm just going to discard it. Well, that's a bummer. Not the victory I was hoping for. So he gets Thing in the Ice down, and because I have Snapcaster, I can go ahead and Time Walk here and play another, take another turn and get the Signet down, as well as Hangerback Walker, and say go. If my opponent flips the Thing in the Ice, the Hangerback Walker goes to my hand, and I can just make it bigger. Otherwise, I, maximize my mana usage. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and fetch here, getting my last Swamp. I knew exactly what my mana base was, so I knew I needed to fetch there. And Swamp was my only option because I had naturally drawn Plains and Savannah. And if I had drawn that Swamp after fetch, like if I waited too long to fetch, I might have actually drawn the Swamp, and then I would have been in trouble. So I would have loved to have gotten an island there, but it wasn't in the cards for me because I just never found the right dual land to go with that marsh flats. I go ahead and try to charge up the Hangerback, and he Fatal Pushes in response, which takes counter off Thing in the Ice and kills it, and I get a flyer. But I do draw a Nature's Claim. However, I'm just going to hardcast Mindslaver and see if he's got something to deal with that. He fetches an Underground, which is interesting. Given that I've got a Wasteland in play, I'll go ahead and attack him for 1 because I'm not blocking with Augur. An Augur with a 1/3. And he, Desperation Time Twister's looking for a way to, like the Mindslaver obviously would have killed him if he hadn't. But it still could now. And as it turns out, the Time Twister almost certainly will. Look at what he put in my hand. A library, a Mirari's Wake, a Scroll Rack. I mean, this is just a gross hand of amazingness. So I go ahead and draw a card off library first. Mindslaver my opponent. I believe, cast Mirari's Wake rather. Then Mindslaver my opponent with the exact seize on mana. And if he had a counterspell, I could have played Mana Crypt and still slavered him. So that was fine. Attack for 2. He's got 1 counter on Thing in the Ice, but so I decide. So I was going to, chill out and didn't do the library thing, but I've got Upheaval, so I don't need to do all that. My opponent's been Mindslavered. I'm going to go ahead and just cast Scroll Rack here and set up so he can make the worst play possible next turn, and I can then Upheaval and win. This is my opponent's hand. Grizzlebrand, Shallow Grave, Necromancy, Massacre Worm, and some lands. So let's do it like that. All right, so he draws. Looks like another land actually. So I have him at the end of the day. Shallow Grave for nothing. Flipping his Horror, which is fine because I'm planning to heave anyway. Picks up his Augur Bolus. So then I'm going to have him cast Necromancy, targeting absolutely nothing. But I wait. So I declare his attack step, then I cast it with Flash so that it will actually kill itself at the end of the turn. Had I not done it that way, if I just cast it on no creature, then when I upheaval, he gets it right back in his hand. All right, so I'm going to Mana Crypt and draw, and this is a perfect time to just win the game. So let's do that. So I'm going to tap for a lot of mana and heave. I could try to scroll rack a better hand here, but I mean, really. All right, so I get to play Mana Crypt for free, of course. Now I'm going to play the scroll rack, and I'm going to try to make the best possible hand so I can make the best possible decisions with the rest of the turn. I put back tons of stuff. I get to look at almost my entire deck in this single turn. I do have this clock ticking over here, so I'm actually playing a little bit differently than I would if that weren't the case. And I end up I end up deciding, oh, I go and fetch a Tinker there, I believe. This deck has Tinker as well. All right, so I throw away Supreme Verdict. So I get Gideon down. I fetch a Tinker. I've got Mana Crypt. I'm going to be able to Tinker into the Sundering Titan. It seems like I probably wouldn't, but the fact of the matter is I have Scroll Rack, so I get to cheat that out and then Tinker directly into him if I want to. This deck has, with Bring to Light in this deck and the other cards in this deck, it has so many ways to put together so many gross combos. I just had a blast playing this one. All right, so we move to round 2. It's King Miles. This was the one I was certain was going to go 3-0. And the reason it doesn't is well, you'll see. I'm looking forward to the last game. All right, and I top deck Library of Alexandria off the top. That's crazy. All right, so wait to draw, of course, and then I get my card with Library. Time Walk, which means I get to draw another card with Library and waste my opponent and play more mana. So at the end of my second turn, I have 4 mana in play and my opponent's down to just 1 land. I get to draw 2 cards and play a Snapcaster Time Walk so we can draw more Library cards. I get to draw 2 cards again. And this time play Gideon Jura, plus it up and pass. So that's my opponent's second turn. Effectively. All right, so he's Frantic Searching, and when I see he's discarding like Sweltering Suns and Reflector Mage, I'm thinking he's either Kiki Jiki combo or control, but very likely control. All right, so I get a Library again. Activate Gideon, smash. I'm going to wait before I play any lands or anything to see what my opponent does, if anything. Doesn't seem to be doing anything, so I'm going to go ahead and trinket for a Hangerback Walker, actually, in case he does find a way to deal with all the pressure that I'm putting on him. Play a Simic Signet, pass, and try to effectively Time Walk him with an Ice on his land, which resolves, and at this point, my opponent gives up. I have exactly 10 damage in play. My opponent's at 10. I thought about holding the Ice because of that factor, but it just seemed to make more sense to continuously play Time Walk and Time Walk-like effects, such as an Ice there. And apparently it was the right call. So we move into game 2. That was pretty gross game 1, though. He definitely got type 1'd. And it looks like it's going to happen again. My hand in round 2 is pure insanity. All right, so Library here. I'm going to be patient. My opponent doesn't kill it. Draw at the end of his turn. Draw for my turn. Play Crypt. Land. Activate Library. And cast, I believe, Orzhov Signet. What's going on here? Yes. Okay, good. So I've got Mystical Tutor, which means that I can go and do Time Walk Madness. Here, my opponent Abrades, does not kill Mana Crypt, which is wild. Of course, I could go get Tinker here as well. Kind of a interesting thing, but I think Time Walk with the Snapcaster and Library running makes way more sense, so I should have gone for that. Yeah, I did. Okay, so I'm going to draw again. Go ahead and do the Time Walk play, and a tapped Steam Bends pass back to myself. Draw, double draw again, Time Walk, and pass back to myself again. Double draw again, winning coin flips while we're at it, might as well. And play a Scroll Rack here, and rack in search of Tinker. I find it, as well as a Mirari's Wake, Vedalken Shackles, the Abyss, Fire Ice, and a Golgari Signet. So I'm going to Ice during upkeep. This is exactly like the last game in many ways. And I get to library again and win another coin flip too while I'm at it, which is weird. And decide rather than tinker, I might just, yeah. I was thinking like, how do I want to do this? But I knew exactly where the Sundering Titan was, and so I end up tinkering here. I'm not going to win coin flips forever. I was thinking about playing Hangerback Walker as well, but it's fine. I can get rid of Mana Crypt now. I've gotten tons of advantage out of it. So I lose at Plains. My opponent loses 2 lands. It's like we're just going to play endless games of setback here. I attempt to Trinket Mage. My opponent paths Titan. In response, unfortunately, both of his duels here are not actually dual lands, so he's safe from this effect, and I've got to kill 2 of my lands. But I use his path to get an additional island, so I really only lost 1. I don't get a swamp, even though I wanted to get another color there, because then I would have had to kill it with Sundering Titan since he pathed in response. Alright, so we're going to double draw here using library. I can't deck myself unless he can kill the scroll rack, so I'm mostly safe from that. And I'm not quite sure what's going to happen here. I think we might bug. Yeah, well, it's unfortunate. But I believe what happened is I played. I think I didn't. I don't think I drew the island. I think I drew a white source, and I played Mox Diamond pitching Thicket, land, Mirari's Wake, and then from there smash my opponent for 6. He tried to do something, and well, I mean, you can imagine how that game went. I mean, it's pretty much over anyway at that point. And so I moved into game 3 feeling really good, and of course, the curse struck. At this point, feeling so frustrated, and this is definitely a problem that I have, is I was so frustrated by the endless series of the way that these games had played out that I kind of like the emotional negativity was affecting my gameplay to some extent. Here's a hand that's a risky keep, but man, there's an incredible payout if I keep it, and it works out. So I decide to keep it. I draw a Mystical Tutor. It's not what I wanted. The Inquisition's away Tinker. I think that's probably safe. Oh, I did get a Steam Vents though. And I do the walk thing because I can, replay it later. Probably should have just played Signet. It's about the equivalent of a Time Walk there, but I play the Signet on the next turn. Okay. So he DTs. I've got Wake here, so I'm going to go for a big Wake. And it sticks, which was interesting. So I'm like, am I going to get Mind Twisted? What's going on here? He Bazaars, Emrakul, then, oh my gosh, then, so Bazaars, Emrakul, and then Shallow Graves it into play. So I did not see that coming. I guess I could have, I mean, what could I have done differently? I don't know, but I have to sack 6 permanents exactly. If it were 5, I could live, right? I'd go to 3, I'd sack everything but the Wake, but then I'd have an island that produced 2 mana, and maybe I could like find a way to get in the game with Between Balance and Mystical Tutor and stuff. But at 6, I lose everything. Okay, but maybe he doesn't have any way to finish me off. So go ahead and play a land. Oh wait, I forgot about Creeping Tar Pit. So I got type 1'd out off my slightly risky keep, but it's kind of, I mean, it's fair. I did, after all, Time Walk. I mean, that's a type 1 play, but man, that felt bad. All right, so second round, turn 1 Scroll Rack. That's pretty good. My opponent Inquisitions and misses. That's also a great feeling. I'm now going to Scroll Rack and improve my hand, I thought. I find library and decide I don't have time to play library games with them, but also I can potentially, so I can use upheaval and such to get to where library ends up being valuable. So I'm going to use library just to activate Scroll Rack for now. Continuously like playing with the top of my library to get set up for heave. Opponent K commands me. It's not too painful here. I've got dig after all. And I've got Bring to Light. So I decided I'm going to play Bring to Light here. I think I should have held out for Upheaval, honestly. But I decided, you know what? I'm going to Bring to Light into Tinker. He just used Artifact Removal. And it's a pretty good Tinker, but this is kind of all-in Tinker. Like, my best play here is probably Tinker for, if I'm going to do this, it probably is Tinker for Sundering Titan. But boy, is it a huge risk. So I decided to take the risk. I get to kill 2 of his lands and none of mine. And I mean, you know, this is a, like I said, it's an all-in play, but it looks pretty good. So I get in for 7. Opponent Frantic searches, and I thought it looked pretty good because he had nothing in his graveyard too. And I mean, it was a big setback, right? But the problem is Reanimator completed, but then yeah, okay, so it is going to play. But then, who cares? Because he's going to Shieldred, makes everything free plays. He gets a free Grizzlebrand, so unless I draw a Sweeper, or Upheaval, or Balance, or a Tutor, or no, I don't draw any of that. I get to kill another land and scoop. Man, 6 lands that I took out of his, and I'm scooping. That was such a feel-bad, like, finals. But, man, the Reanimator decks are just brutal in this format. So, all right, so I try one more round, I think, and then I call it for that night as well. So this is that last round. I thought that was actually a game that, like, I feel like we didn't see the game that I actually thought, but maybe that deck wasn't the deck that actually had the one that I thought was my best played game of the whole series. All right, so my opponent Ancestrals, I go ahead and Wasteland him, hoping that it's going to turn out that he's going to end up discarding, and he does. So it takes some of the sting out of the Wasteland. So this deck I drafted was a very, very controlling deck, and so I tried to take it a different way. I'm playing Grixis Control now. Opponent has, and this was actually a heartbreaking loss, if I remember correctly. All right, so I've got Jace to his Jace. We're both drawing cards. We're pretty close, even though he's Ancestral. We're pretty doggone close on cards right now. He gets in a Johnny, though. A Johnny, I think, is going to pummel Jace. No, he actually taps the land down. Very, kind of a strange choice there. So I draw Baleful Strix, and then Jace finds me a Badlands, which means I get to smoke a Johnny if I want. But I actually decide I'm going to Ashiok because I have the feeling that this game is going to go. I can get to a Johnny in a moment, and if he kills Jace here, you know, whatever. But if I get Ashiok down and I can exile him, because he looks like the same style deck that I am, Ashiok in these matches is super, super scary. All right, so he Jaces to make us both draw, and then goes Crypt, Gilded Lotus, a Johnny, one of my lands, and pass. I, on the other hand, get to duress my opponent, seeing a Braid, Bolt, Mind Twist, Painful Truce, Wildfire. So I'm pretty sure I need to take Mind Twist here, but I'm in a bad spot because Wildfire is very scary here. So I'm going to Ashiok my opponent, play a land, Dak Faden away his Gilded Lotus, I believe, which he will Abrade, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And then he Lightning Bolts my Dak Faden, if I'm not mistaken. Nope, my Ashiok. So he's trying to get, he needs to get Ashiok down because he realizes finally the Ashiok's going to actually kill him. And I plus Jace making us both draw, which was foolish. I should have duressed him first. I mean, I should have plus then duressed him. But on the other hand, because Ashiok's the kill condition, and we're both using Jace's, he's down to only 14 cards in library. And from my point of view, this makes a lot of sense because, so he's down to 12 now. He gets a Mox Jet. He's gonna Painful Truce, and then Johnny's the Ashiok again, I believe. No, he kills the Dak Faden. It's too dangerous for him at this point because I could Dak Faden him and Jace him and Ashiok, and then he Wildfires. Okay. painful, but not purely crippling. He also had Johnny's my land, I believe. No, he could not have Johnny my land because he killed a creature. So during upkeep, so I draw a land for the turns, and then Vampiric Tutor so that I can Jace the card into my hand, and I have Vampiric for Mox Ruby. So I can play land, Dreadbore, boom, kill your Johnny, and he dazes it. Ah, man, all that was such, I thought that was such a great bit of work I put in there. But anyway, I do get to Ashiok him. He's down to 6 cards in library now. And he goes for a, what was his play here? Yeah, he has is basically nothing. I mean, I can't remember what play he goes to make, but I mean, I get to Ashiok him again, and then after a certain point, I think he just scoops or he gets out of cards. And so we move into game 2. And a very solid, definite keep hand. Opponent does not lead off with a duress or effect or of any sort, so I'm able to take his Growl Signet here. And this was a bit of a heartbreak for me if I remember this game too, but not the worst because, you know, it's still only game 2. Alright, so I get to Sorcerer's Spyglass here, and he's got a Izzet Charm. So I know he's played an island and he drew an Izzet Charm for the turn. That was frustrating. Alright, so he plays a Bloodstained Mire. I get to play a land and pass. So he fetches, and then during his upkeep, I'm going to go ahead and click him. So I really don't want him getting Chandra. And he's got a Mind Twist. So I've got to take that. So I get rid of the Mind Twist, I believe. Which means he's got an extra card in his hand that I don't know about. So he plays an island, and it turns out to be Mana Crypt, which means he gets to get Chandra Flamecaller down really early, but he's missing that other red, so he has to play the Guild Lotus first, so he does that. And a Dimir Signet. So the last card in his hand is Chandra Flamecaller. So can I play this correctly and try to get a win out of this? We're going to find out. So I play Liliana, plus it up, make a zombie, hitting a Phyrexian Revoker, which, awesome. So I can replay that and deal with the Chandra that way. And then I've got this little engine of Liliana and Crucible going. It's pretty nice. Alright, so he goes for Chandra. Of course, I'm going to block. And this was a huge error on my part as well. So all I had to do is just block one and keep the 3-1 around. Or I could have let them both go, killed Liliana, and attack back and killed this. Any of that might have been okay, but double blocking there was super greedy. So I'm going to play this cute little Revoker play here. I should have just blocked with one and attacked Chandra. And this is why I said this was kind of heartbreaking, because I really punted this game. You know, I gave it away. I'm not sure what happened, but I'll sum it up for you. My opponent kills Phyrexian Revoker, and then Chandra's my Liliana down, and then very quickly the game is completely out of hand, and I get crushed. So we move into game 3 of round 1. And I've got a pretty solid draw. Get to go with the first turn Mana Leak. Turn 2 Ashiok. It's actually really good. Okay. I go for it. It sticks, and I start removing. Start the exile and get Rakdos, Painful Truths, and a land. Very nice. Opponent has Sorcerer's Spyglass though, so he shuts off Ashiok, and that was pretty unfortunate. So I duress him. And I see this. So my opponent's hand is basically like he's never going to play any of this stuff because he has no land. All I have to do is take the Dimir Signet, and I should win. But he top decks a land, I believe. No, does he? So these are the cards that I know about. No, he does not. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and play Baleful Strix, still not finding a land myself. Alright, so he gets a swamp there. It's a weird game that we have to play. I'm going to go ahead and Painful Truce, not finding a land again. Starting to feel kind of bad. Throwing away a Dreadbore. Opponent ponders, so he found a ponder into another land. I still have not found a land. And I'm like, wow. The curse is striking again. So I throw away a Cryptic. Opponent plays another land. Alright, at the end of his turn, I was thinking about icing, but then I realized, like, he's got Mystic Confluence now. It's too late. If I ice, he's just going to draw 3 cards. So I do finally get a land. It's not one that'll let me play him, but I've got to leave Baleful Strixhome to fight off Lava Claw, because I don't want him Lava Clawing my face, first of all, and I don't want him hitting Ashok in case I do find a red for that K command that I've got. Alright, so now I can safely at least ice. So I do that. And he knows I have Mana Leak, though, so I mean, you know, he's playing around the card that's known. I do draw him here, which is really nice, so I get Confluence Wildfire. That helps, definitely. Alright, so he's got 2 unknowns in his hand. I've got to pass again. I mean, I could take a look with Sorcerer's Spyglass, but if he taps out for Vraska, then, you know, I'll deal with it at that time. Otherwise, I'm planning to play it next turn, but him just was way too good there. Alright, Wasteland will allow me to at least start attacking, so I kill Lava Claw Reaches and attack. What I really want to do is stick a Tamio and lock down some mana over there, but I'm not ready for that. So I go for Sorcerer's Spyglass. Finally, my opponent decides he's going to, I thought, go ahead and run his Confluence into my Leak, which I was going to be fine with. Instead, he just makes this play here. So I end up naming a Johnny Vengeance, I believe. I'm not sure. No, what is going on with these replays? Wow, we're really bugging out. I don't know what's going on with the replays. This is super disappointing. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, though, that I named a Johnny Vengeance here. My opponent finally decides to Confluence, and I counter it. On his turn, he plays Gilded Lotus. And then on my turn, I actually draw a red, I believe. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can't remember what I draw, but anyway, I hostage taker his Lotus. It stays mine. He doesn't find a way to kill it, and I'm able to play his Gilded Lotus, which gives me the red I need to K command his Sorceress Spyglass, and from there I get to start Ashiocking him and manage to win that way. So that was an unfortunate glitch there, and I actually move into the finals against K Meerkat, thinking, okay, curse is over, it's broken. But of course, as you can see, that's not the case. Alright, so. And my opponent is also playing, I'm playing the mirror again. So it was very weird that I had all these mirror matches. Like, the game just kept pairing me up against other decks that were playing the same stuff. It's kind of odd to me. But, okay. Anyway, he's got a great start, and the only reason I'm not 100% dead is because I was able to daze a Dak Faden, although it did send me back a land drop. And it works out okay because he activates a Creeping Tar Pit and swings, so I'm able to set him back a land drop. And then, so he fetches for no real purpose that I can see other than icing me down, but I drew a Wasteland. Because I have Mana Leak and he's not threatening to activate the Shelldock just yet, I go ahead and just play, because it seemed like that ice play could have been a way to push through a big turn, so I didn't want that to happen. Alright, and then during my upkeep, he goes for Snapcaster, so I gotta let that go. And ices again, and I decide I don't want him to have a card. He's down to 2 cards in hand, or 1 card in hand, so I decide this Mana Leak functions as a counter for 50% of the cards in his hand, so taking 50% of my opponent's options away seemed like a worthwhile play. So I go ahead and Mana Leak there. I feel a little bad because I'd really like to have the Leak in my hand. Frankly, I wish the Snapcaster were off the board, because now if I play Dak Faden, he can kill it. And I really want to play Dak Faden because I've been suppressing mana to the best of my ability here, which has been pretty effective. Anyway, so I Inquisition my opponent, and the last card in his hand is Cycle of Sweltering Suns into lucky me, a card that I can still Inquisition. So Abbott's gone, so he has no cards in hand. I'm thinking really hard, and that Snapcaster is really, really a pain in my butt right now. Jace isn't good, the other Jace isn't so good, Dak's not good. It's amazing how strong a Snapcaster is, but by using Dak Faden here, I did at least create equilibrium in the mana bases. And that's really good because I gave up a Dak Faden to do it, but Snapcaster Mana Leak is a thing now if I need it to be. My opponent plays Ral Zarek though. I'm getting Zarekt over here, and I top deck a Dreadbore. Woohoo! Okay, so I get to take him out before it generates any kind of advantage for my opponent, but I can't really effectively play Jace Beleren, and because I had to make that play there, and so I end up just passing. I can't do a lot with Snapcaster. Snapcaster's really messing with me. He plays a Hypnotic Spectre, and I'm glad that I didn't do anything foolish with the Snapcaster, but then I draw K-Command, so I was thinking I needed to snap Dreadbore, but with the Kolaghan's command, I can actually continue the mana suppression and take out the Spectre, so I do that. And that's also really good because Snapcaster K-Command is awesome. I drew a land there, which I actually quite a bit wanted. Pass for the turn. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and Snapcaster during upkeep, and then Kolaghan's command the last card in his hand and the Snapcaster off the board, and I've turned his incredible mana draw into a mana deficiency finally. He drew a Terminate and decides to just run it out against my Snapcaster, which is brilliant for me because it opens the route for Jace, and I'm able to Jace into Cryptic, tucking a Sower and a Mox. Alright, so I get to play Jace Beleren here, plus up my other Jace a card into my hand. If I want to, I could even Vampiric Tutor first, but I decide not to, so I just Mox Ruby and pass. Opponent has one card in hand, so good time to vamp. And I decide I'm going to go get him. I do the split, taking, I think, Vendilion Click. No, I take Painful Truce. And, Ashok is the card I fetched. Him was the card I drew. Okay. So I go ahead and get Ashok down and start working it. He's got one card in hand. I wasn't super worried because I had Cryptic. And so I'm holding him because trying to decide like the best way to utilize it. I really want to get 2 for 1 rather than 1 for 1. Opponent draws and passes. So what I was thinking about was like maybe if he made a play here, I just counter. It really just depended on how this played out, because he might have done nothing, in which case I could Cryptic an island back to his hand, or swamp, the other one back to his hand, try to him it out. But mainly the point was just stall for Ashok, win game, which is exactly what this deck is supposed to do. Alright, so game 1 went well. So we do our sideboarding and move into game 2, I believe it is. Or was that game 2? Yeah, no, we move into game 2. And look at this great hand. I'm super excited, and I have Dak Faden. He's huge in this match, along with an early him. Alright, so he gets out of Rakdos Signet. I'm going to go ahead and set myself up so if I draw a red, I can get Dak down. I him, my opponent gets Sweltering Suns, which is a bummer. I get a land, which is probably pretty good. My opponent only has 3 cards left. And then plays Hedron Archive. That's a little scary, but if I was able to Dak here, I got this win. Instead, I draw Crucible World. So I play Crucible so that I can. Misty cannot get red in my deck, but still I can start using it for value. And my opponent Daks it away from me, and oh crap. And as I've been saying, the curse strikes again. I am still mana screwed on black. I go ahead and kill his young Pyromancer and play a Baleful Strix so that I can hopefully attack his Dak Faden, but he's using it for tons of value because he gets to use the Dak Faden Crucible combo. Hymns, Tamio, and Cryptic out of my hand. Ouch, ouch, all kinds of ouch. Plays a Solemn, plays a land, and if I'd have drew a land right there, I think I still could have won. If I drew a red right there, because I could have Dak Faden, stole his Solemn Simulacrum most likely. and then use it to entice him to either try to steal it back with Dak Faden. Well, I'm going to hit Dak Faden, so he couldn't steal it back. So potentially just like set up in a really nice way, basically. But I wasn't able to do that, of course. So I go ahead and play Snapcaster, I think. Oh, we'll see. So he's dacking, and no, I end up not doing it. So I drew Fire Ice, and I have a weird scenario where I can try to figure out what I want to do. I end up deciding I'm going to him a second time. I take Toxic Deluge and Karn Liberated, so that felt pretty good. But I don't take Terminate. That felt pretty bad. Alright, so there's Dak Faden still doing amazing things. My opponent plays Rouse Wreck. I've got 2 huge problems. 3, really. I finally draw red for the first time and decide I'm going to steal Solemn. But this is much later than I needed to. I do have Fire Ice here, so I can stop Wandering Fumarole from killing Dak. And if he doesn't Rouse a Wreck, I mean possibly, and if he doesn't Rouse a Wreck, Dak down. If he does, at least it kills Rouse a Wreck. If he doesn't, then that's not so bad either. And then if he uses Dak to see, like say he Rouse the X and then Dak Fadens and kills both of these, well, at least I've gotten rid of 2 Planeswalkers and maybe I have a chance. Instead, he Frost Titans, Rouse the X, and well, bottom line is there's no coming back from that, and we move to game 3. Just a frustrating game. And because that mountain just took forever. Alright, so I get to rest my opponent, and I see a 2-lander with a Hedron Archive. So I take the Hedron Archive. Opponent plays Blood Crypt for the turn, and I've got a Wasteland with Crucible. So this game should be over. This is game 3. Opponent top decks Shelldock Isle. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and play Spellskite here. Plays a Swamp off the top again, obviously. Okay. I'll go ahead and play a land here, and I cast him. I'm trying to crush whatever options my opponent might be available to him. Trying to hit his land, actually. Miss the land. I pass. So I don't want to play the Crucible now and reveal it. I want to play it on the next turn so I can Wasteland right away, right? So my opponent Polluted Deltas into a Swamp and cast Hypnotic Spectre. Alright. So kind of have to go for the throat that thing, but I can Inquisition here if I want to. So I decide, yeah, I'll do that. So I see Solemn Island Conscripts. Okay. Conscripts not too good against the Spellskite. When it plays Island Solemn. So all he's got is Conscripts and an Unknown. So I should be in good shape here. Mox is nice because I can actually play the Crucible. Wasteland is his threat, his Shelldock, and pass. Really want to get this Ashiok down, but I just haven't had a window at all. It's been pretty ugly. Alright, so he plays Conscripts. I force him to take Spellskite, of course. And I take a little bit of damage, but now things look really good. I mean, I get to use Crucible. I've got Ashiok going. Opponent only has 1 card in hand. Got a blocker for his guy. Feeling pretty good. Alright, so I exile some cards. Don't know of anything else in his hand, so I'm going to close that. Alright, so I ice his Conscripts just to protect Ashiok for a little while longer and dig. Exile more cards. I'm looking for a creature, please. Still not finding it. Alright, gonna block Conscripts, and Ashiok will take a small hit. Opponent deluges and finishes off his Solemn and my Spellskite, so maybe blocking wasn't such a good idea. Ouch, but I hit him with Ashiok again. He's got 12 cards in his library. I draw Vampiric Tutor, and I also play Sorcerous Spyglass, hoping that I'm going to hit something. But if not, I go ahead and end up naming... Oh, I don't remember. No. God, this game was one of the most, like, awful games to lose. Alright, so bugging out again. But at the end of the game, my opponent had... I was at 5, and my opponent had... Or I was at 7, and my opponent had this Conscripts in play. I had no blocker. When I had only a few cards left in his deck, I had no cards in my hand except for Hostage Taker, and I make a very bad play. I should have played Hostage Taker and not exiled his guy, just exiled one of my own permanents and said go. But instead I make the play of exile his haste guy. So he draws, and with 2 cards left in his library and a milled off Flame Tongue Kavu already, finds his Hostage Taker. His Hostage Taker exiles my Hostage Taker, putting his Zealot into play with haste, which then gives haste to his other guy, and I was at 5, and he swings for 6 and kills me. And I just could not believe that that had happened. And but I did misplay it, and oh god, it was so painful. And the curse strikes again. Then I played against Hand Jam here and crushed him, I believe, with the Grixis deck. And then finally we're moving towards the end of this video, which if you stuck around this long, you must just really like Vintage Cube as much as I do, because I realize this isn't the most exciting video after all, but it's I think hopefully instructive in some different types of builds you can do, what works, what hasn't been working for me, what I've lost to, the bad plays I've made that maybe you want to consider if you're ever in a similar board state, and so on and so forth. So hopefully it's been of interest to you. So my opponent's got a really fast start, but not really doing much with it. There's definitely 2 major threats on the board there, and I want to get one of them off the board if I can. I'm having a tough time deciding which one's the bigger threat, and ultimately I think Skull Clamp is. But I'm kind of waiting to see what he does, because if he plays like some sort of like group of small creatures here or something, then I definitely am killing the Skull Clamp. But if he plays like a single creature, I might kill, say, the creature in the clamp or the creature in the shrine, depending on how I feel about it. If he just goes burn to the face, then it's the shrine, I think. Anyway, he doesn't do anything, so Clamp is the bigger threat between the 2. I take a card out of his hand and the Skull Clamp, which turns out to be a land. And I finally find my first blue of the game, which is really nice. So the other reason for hitting his hand there is because I could get a land, and since I was holding Mana Leak and Daze, killing my opponent's mana gets quite a bit more valuable. Alright, so I've got Dak Faden, so I do have a solution for Shrine. I just got to time this correctly for maximum value. My opponent's stalled out, and so am I, because I can't hit land drops for anything. And I don't want to tap out. Finally, he does tap enough mana that I'm able to counter his Ajani Vengeance, and that clears the way for Dak Faden. Still haven't drawn a land, just that one though, but one was all I needed. I go ahead and Dak his Shrine, which is huge, and at that point my opponent gives up. So great hand there to follow up had he not given up. And if he didn't kill Dak Faden right away, then Dak was surely going to dig me out of the mana problem that I was having. So another great hand here. Anything with an early Dak Faden's good, but I actually draw Inquisition to add insult to injury, and my opponent, after I take like his only play, just decides it's not worth it. It's just we're just trying to break even on cash, and he's probably not having any fun, so he just scoops. A turn 2 Dak Faden here is just gross. So, and there's the Hostage Taker who, or no, I must have been I was at 5, yeah, because Hostage Taker was 2 and the 3/3 was 3, and the last one when I died. So anyway, that was that, and yeah, that was very frustrating again. So I finally sat down this evening, or it was this evening, to give it one last try, hopefully, and I did not manage to pull it off in the first set, but I definitely did in the second. It's weird, but I feel like the best game of the entire series somehow either bugged out or we just didn't get to see it. I'm going to look for it, and if I find that game, I'll make an independent video out of it. So I decided I'm going to try to be the bad guy here and play some kind of reanimator thing. And as it turned out, I very quickly realized that cards that I had drafted because I didn't want to be beat with them were actually better than the cards I initially selected to play. It became particularly obvious when my opponent, as it turns out, was playing Reanimator. So I had no idea, and I basically just stacked my graveyard for my opponent to kill me, and that's exactly what he did. Alish Norn comes down, and I'm just getting beat to all heck. Desperation look, and find nothing and die. So not super fun. So I sideboard out all the reanimation stuff, and the deck works so much better that I actually stuck with that for the rest of the league. So I sideboard out into a black-white aggro build with some reasonable, a little bit of disruption, but primarily just lots of pressure. All right, so I get Nezumi Grave Robber down, which hopefully will help against the reanimation stuff. Nope, not against an Edict, but it did help protect Brimaz, who would have died to an Edict, so that's good. My opponent doesn't have removal here, then I'm in good shape. And Reanimator usually doesn't have a ton, but instead he's matching me card for card. Well, that's okay, as long as he doesn't continue. I send in both, and he actually opts not to block, which surprised me and allowed me to play Desecration Demon, feeling pretty comfortable about the whole situation. He does get the little snake maker guy, but he can sack those to the demons over and over, but that's okay. So anyway, I've got Gideon, and I go ahead and just plus him right away and get ready to attack. My opponent taps me down here. Now I'm making 2/2 cats, but then I decide, nah, you know what? I've got a better idea. Instead of trying to play fancy here, I'm just going to Imperial Seal, and my opponent helps me out by putting even more things that are soon not long for this world into play. I get Toxic Deluge, I get to smash, I do Deluge before declaring my attack step. Of course, you can't tap my demon. I get to make 2/2 cats, and in a moment my guys are going to grow. Yeah, so an 8/8, a 2/2, and a 4/5 who makes more 2/2s. Yeah, that's it. My opponent at 5 life. We moved to the third game, so very nice how that played out. I'm not giving my opponent Ionas and Terastodons and Grizzlebrands to kill me with. So the problem was I drafted this great Reanimator deck. I had 3 perfect targets and every card you could want to put cards in the graveyard, Una, all that stuff. What I didn't have was actual reanimation spells. I only had 2. And it turned out somebody else was drafting Reanimator. And I guess it was this guy, Black Lotus guy. So I'm not sure how I win this game. It certainly doesn't look good for me, but it's a strong deck, and well, I do have lots of removal here. So I actually decide that I don't care very much about the zombies. So I'm actually gonna save the Deluge, and hopefully it will save the day eventually. So I'm gonna play him. Just let the zombies hit me and play Hypnotic Spectre here. Because I may need the Deluge since I know he's playing some Reanimator effects. If he puts a zombie back into play, then things get out of hand. But the Wall of Blossoms does fine here. I play Kalidas and pass after getting a card at random out of my opponent's hand. And he Wraths. And then the reason I played Kalidas was specifically so I would get a zombie post-Wrath. And also because, well, he's playing Reanimator. Alright, so I Knight into a Plains. And decide it's worth the risk. I need to get the pressure, and so if he is reanimating, I do have answers and ways to get answers in my hand. Otherwise, I want the 3/1 flyer to pressure my opponent, so I go ahead and top into a very poor top of library. Fortunately, I have been saving the Imperial Seal for when I got a bad top of library, and I go ahead and seal 2 lands again, but I go get Liliana. So let's kill that thing, smash my opponent for lots of damage, and he scoops, and we just move in to the final round, or the final game. And I have a very solid hand. Good anti-edict hand. So I lead off with Plains, of course, because I might want to play the Knight if I draw a Plains. My opponent has Black Lotus again. Or is this the same? Oh, this is the same game. I'm sorry. That was the third game. Yeah. Okay. That's right, because I tricked him in round 2, or I fake sideboarded, and it went fine. And then round 3, the jig was up. But but it went fine again. So, all right. Round 2 was against Smitch. Game 2 against that guy went fine, obviously. All right, so Smitch. And I have now decided that this is the better build for the deck, so we're going with this. Very aggressive disruption package. And as long as I don't get like just blown out by the craziness of Vintage Cube, I should be doing pretty well. So I really would have loved to go Selfless Spirit here, but Draga Tree Speaker, gotta kill it in response to the pump. All right, and now we get to go Bremaz. I would have loved to have Selfless Spirit into Bremaz. I would have felt much safer with my Bremaz, but anyway, my opponent plays an Awakening Zone, and I can take all of his hand away, so we're definitely doing that, and smash with Bremaz. I get Karn, Elish Norn, and Jace. Wow. Okay, good to see that go away. He's making some spawn there, and plays an Edric, who is very unlikely to ever be useful against me. I go ahead and just immediately Gideon, because Bremaz Gideon is just gross, and there's no reason to dink around with trying to make tokens when you've got a guy who's making tokens. Just make them stronger. So I get Kalidas, Selfless Spirit down, and of course I wouldn't normally play into a Wrath of God here, but I have Selfless Spirit, so feels pretty safe. And Bremaz just going insane with Gideon. And my opponent, I think, if I remember correctly, Wrath of Godded here, or I mean, not Wrath of Godded, he, Day of Judgment, I sack Selfish Spirit and he scoops. Alright, I think. It's hard to tell because sometimes at the end of the game, when you're doing the replays, sometimes the last turn doesn't actually fully play out the way that it actually occurred. Anyway, opponent leads off with an Arbor Elf. I go ahead and play the Plains in case I draw the Knight. But he then gets Draga Tree Speaker, pumps it, and I ultimate price it again, thankfully. Thing is such a house. And I get to go early Hypnotic Spectre. Opponent has Sword, but I'm now beating him down with the Spectre, and Spectre's damage is much worse than the Sword's in a lot of ways. I get Prime Time out of his hand, and because my opponent missed a land drop, instead of playing Gideon and blocking, I Hero's Downfall his Arbor Elf. Anything to stall with a hippie beating your opponent down is a good thing. Alright, so we get another card at random, is a Karn. Now I'll play Gideon and make a token. I need tokens because of the sword. Alright, pre-combat, I go ahead and slam down Kalidas and then smash. Make a token. And get an Elspeth out of his hand. He sacks his guy. I now get a zombie thanks to the sack. So if he doesn't clear the board, then I'm in great shape. He acidic slimes away a Concealed Crossroads, but I recoup that with a Knight of the White Orchid right afterwards into mind twisting my opponent's hand. I get an Armageddon, ultimating my Planeswalker and sending in the entire team. My opponent gets to block one creature and die. Awesome stuff. Okay. So that was round 2, and then round 3, the curse continues, and then I finally get to actually win one in the next set. So let's go through this one. Very adequate hand, turns extremely good, or has the potential to turn extremely good if I can find some black there to go with that Mind Twist, especially against a double island start from my opponent. Get a Wall of Omens. I'm going to have to play like risky and run into potential mana drains so I can't play around them, can't afford to. I play a Monastery Mentor, my opponent just kills it. Okay, no big deal. And I find a swamp and go for it. Gideon. I want to hit the Mind Twist more than I want to hit the Gideon, so I get a counterspell out of his hand, and then he plays Solemn, and there's my window. If I draw land, I can take all 4 cards. I do not, but I will take 75% of my opponent's hand randomly discarded is pretty good too. So I get Control Magic, Counterspell, Toxic Deluge, and I feel like, okay, well I should win this game. Wrong as it turns out. So I play here Lightning Greaves, and I send in for some damage, and I've got Nezumi Shortfang, who I can make my opponent discard. And I can do it on his turn. So I do it in response to a Mystic Confluence, which turns out to have been a huge, huge, huge mistake. So this flips the Short Fang, and that means I can no longer make him discard. I had forgotten that it loses the discard ability when it flips. So this is very bad for me because I need a Disrupting Scepter against the blue deck. And not having one here proves to be absolutely horrible. So wouldn't I like to take a card out of my opponent's hand right now? Sure enough, I would. Alright, well, I'm going to send in for an offered trade with his Baleful, which he accepts, which I'm fine with because I need the thing off the table so I can slam Bremaz. And I've got the ability to exile creatures from his graveyard, figuring he's Reanimator because I'm seeing Luterial Core, or he could be Reanimator. He had Godpharaoh's Gift also, so he gets a Wormcoil Engine down so bad. I'm going to exile the Baleful Strix. I draw a Hypnotic Spectre, which is a killer draw when you have Lightning Greaves out. I love that. There's a really nice curve of turn 2 Greaves, turn 3 Spectre in this format. Alright, but anyway, I get to randomly take half my opponent's hand since he's got exactly two. Oh no, 2 cards. Anyway, what ends up happening though is that I cannot find an answer to Wormcoil no matter what I do, and I die to it. I mean, I try and try to deal with it, but yeah, I end up just losing to Wormcoil, and we move to game 3. That bug is just the worst. This program is so bad. It's so very, very bad. And the worst thing to me, alright, so opponent disrupts early. Strangely enough, not taking Liliana. A little bit of an odd choice there. Gets a Strix down. I decided to go with Greaves over the Short Fang because I can always play Short Fang and then later, but I was hoping to sweep the board. I make a big mistake here though. I sweep early. He knows I've got the sweep, even let me keep it. This was a bait from my opponent and it was well done, and I took the bait and I pay for it because there is a Pack Rat. And he has a counter spell and I miss a land drop and now I lose the game. And I will save you the trouble, but he does nothing but activate Pack Rat every turn until I die. So I die. Because that card's absolutely stupid. Alright, so we move into the final attempts to get myself a 3-0, and I managed to pull it off, and this deck was pretty cool and a lot of fun to play, and not really my normal thing, but I actually managed to draft a Strip Mine early, and I see a Wasteland, and I'm like, please find a Crucible. Please find a Crucible. I don't think I did, but I ended up with a really strong deck that splashed blue for only 3 cards, and I'll actually show you what the deck is now. So initially, I made an adjustment after game 1, and this is what the deck ended up looking like. So it ended up looking like that. Is there a way I can zoom? I think so. Whoa, not that much. Oh, that was way too much. Somewhere between 100 and 200 would be nice. But anyway, so yeah, so it ended up looking like this. Very aggressive 15 land Mox deck with land tax in the sideboard. I brought it in against like a blue control deck, but otherwise I left it out. I left out Wall of Omens. I didn't play anything that wasn't pushing my agenda of damage. There's a ton of combos in here. Gideon I thought was really pretty good, or could have been good, but not great, because it doesn't really fit the rest of what the deck is trying to do. It's just a beater like the Adanto Vanguard, but most of these cards are damage dealers who also provide some sort of card advantage, or Bremaz does, Recruiter does, Knight does, Stoneforge does, Selfless Spirit can if it's gonna prevent a board wipe. You can also get a Selfless Spirit Sun Titan thing going, as well as a Sun Titan Strip Mine thing going, and then Archangel of Thune provides tons of value if Better Skull, Sword of Light, and Shadow are running. It'll grow the creatures, plus it itself has lifelink. And then the Sanctity is double exile, Elspeth Resto, Hero Bladehold. So just tons of that, and then 2 Gaia's Cradles, the Cradle and the Rites of Itlamok, plus a Rex Sage, and then these 3 blue cards I splashed for. I got Noble Hierarch, Mox Diamond, and the Island, plus a Tropical Island that I can play these blue cards for, Edric, Trigon, and Reflector Mage. Just a fantastic, super, super good tempo deck. And as long as they don't get blown out by just the nasty type 1 plays, turn 2 channel Emrakul stuff, then this deck has a lot of potential. And even if I do get hit with that, if I'm going first, I might be able to, or even second with a Mox, I might even be able to Rexage it up. All right, so I strip mine an island early and then run out a Stoneforge and fetch up a Batterskull, and then my opponent goes Metalworker, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that's scary. Luckily, I do have Reflector Mage in my hand though, so I'm going to go ahead and bounce that and waste the workshop. It sets me back from having used gotten the Batterskull into play, but I do have the Angel in my hand that will exile his guy potentially. So now I can address it if he's able to play it. Go ahead and use Gaia's Cradle to play Growing Rights of Itlimoc, and then misclick. I meant to play Mother of Runes and flip the rights immediately. So I just hurt myself quite a bit, slowing me way down this turn. But I do have, my opponent gets Mox into Metalworker again, but I have Angel to exile that. And I'm bashing with a lot of guys, but a non-active Mother of Ruins. And because I didn't, well, luckily, this eventually flips the rights, which means I can pick up the Batterskull in response to Master Removal. The Angel, of course, is replayable, so if he does Master Removal, I would lose the Mother, and this card, the Stoneforge, already did his work by getting me the equipment. So he would Master Removal only 2 cards in terms of how many cards I would lose in value. And so he didn't even have that, though, and I'm able to win, even though my opponent had technically better Type 1 style cards. All right, so I've got a great start here if my opponent does not have something too crazy, and I draw Mox Diamond, which is even better. I'm going to go ahead and strip mine him during his upkeep, hoping that I can stymie his blue long enough to leverage the rest of this hand. But Selfless Spirit into Trigon's a really nice curve because Trigon can do some serious work against a Workshop deck. Opponent had the Workshop, possibly sandbagging against my strip mine, hard to say, but he uses it to play Power Stone, and I've got the Trigon, so he gets a Mox Sapphire down and clones my Trigon, and now I'm not feeling super excited, but I top deck a Reflector Mage, so we'll bounce that and kill his at least his Strand Dynamo here, hopefully slowing him down. Maybe he's choking on stuff like Ujin, Karn, and stuff. Okay. Unfortunately, the card I bounced was Trigon Predator. So even though he is holding... Oh, so he could play a Metamorph right here. Yeah, and he does. He tries to Day of Judgment. Of course, Selfless Spirit saves me from that. But because the card was Trigon Predator when it was in play and I bounced it, and it's Phyrexian Metamorph in his hand, they don't actually have the same name, so Reflector Mage does not stop him from replaying it. So disappointing there, but saving my guys from a Day of Judgment, that was very cool. So now I get to send in for a lot of damage. My opponent's stall blocking, but if he doesn't have a solution here, he's pretty much doomed. And I think he makes a... I don't know what he was thinking here, but yeah, so I go for Elspeth pre-combat. I should have played a land first because of Spell Pierce, so that was a misplay. But he plays Confluence and then just inexplicably does it this way and blocks, lets the 2 through. I can't figure out what he was doing here. So yeah, fortunately I didn't have to because he's at 0 and we can move on to the next opponent. But it was a really strange block there. All right. So round 1 against Anton Marvelton. I've got this amazing hand where I get to go first, develop 2 mana sources and disrupt, but he does have a follow-up play. However, my follow-up play on turn 2 of 2 more mana sources into Elspeth feels better. When it does hit the Elspeth and then Boros Charm it down, but at least I got tempo and I'm left with a card. On my turn I get to play sort of Light and Shadow, equip it, and smash. This just does extra damage and gives me life, but still, it looks like it's going to be a race, so that probably pays out. My opponent plays Nahiri. He can't exile the sword, though, because the sword itself doesn't tap, and he can't exile the creature because it's pro-white, so I go ahead and wasteland my opponent, play a Trigon, and pass. If my opponent doesn't have a solution, I can kill that Mox Ruby. I draw a Sun Titan, and I really want another land now because that would allow me to Sun Titan, strip mine, lock my opponent. Go and send in and decide Trigon's actually going to kill the Mox, and I'm just going to hit the Nahiri, and he trades his 1/1 for my 1/1, who immediately comes back to my hand thanks to sword and hits the board again. He plays a Porcelain Legionnaire on his turn, another artifact creature. I've now got a Trigon with a sword on it. Nahiri can't touch it. I can continuously kill any artifacts he's playing, and if he doesn't play artifacts, I get to kill Nahiri. So I drew a Reflector Mage, but before I can even attack here, he's looking at the board and decides that he's done, and I agree. So that was game 1 and 2. And oh no, sorry, that was game 1 against Anton Marvelton, and we moved to game 2. I make whatever appropriate sideboard decisions I have. I've got a very nice hand. Look at that. My opponent also does, so he had multiple Moxen in his deck. I get first turn Noble Hierarch. I should have gone first turn Mox into Noble Hierarch probably. Alright, but I did not. So anyway, I'm going to go turn 2 Knight of the White Orchid off a Mox that I pay 1 for. Fetching a Savannah, and then I'm going to cast Stoneforge Mystic. I'm sandbagging the strip mine for a bit because I'd rather get the aggressive pressure start, and then I'll go ahead and use the waste or the strip mine. I was hoping I could draw a wasteland as well, but so I get strip mine though for his mountain. This deck also has Rishadan Port, so many ways to disrupt mana. Send in with a 3/3 first striker. Play Mother of Runes. Opponent swords my Stoneforge in response, but I have a response to that, which is Resto, flipping Stoneforge and finding myself a forged sword. And I pass the turn with 2 pieces of equipment now and a Restoration Angel. And my opponent's choking on mana, and his own Thalia is a problem for him. I will not kill the Thalia if I can help it. He plays a Smuggler's Copter and realizes that he's just way behind, way too far behind on tempo, and he's about to start getting the heavy beat down, and so he just scoops. And I move to round 3 against Todd Toast, and I start to think that the curse is going to strike again, and oh boy, that's such a terrible feeling at this point. Because while it may have been a very long video, you can imagine this has been a very long season of losses. So anyway, I get to lead off here though with a little bit. It's a risky keep, but I have Selfless Spirit and a Gaia's Cradle to get my other mana sources on board. And when he plays the Badlands, I think, oh no. But he does not kill the Spirit, which was very important. So now I have a tough decision to make and ultimately decide I'm going to take out his Badlands because I need to disrupt his color more than I need to worry about that sheltered Shelldock Isle. And I'm able to go ahead and get a sword down and hit for 5 in the air, gaining some life. But it still doesn't, it deals with the flip Delver, no problem, but it doesn't deal with the thing in the ice if that thing flips. But my opponent missed a land drop. I have Rishadan Port as well, so in play this time. So I'm going to go ahead and send first, see what happens. And nothing too exciting happens there. And so now I just play a land and pass. During my upkeep, I'm going to port my opponent. He gets a second island down, which he obviously just drew. It's down to 7 though, so this is quickly getting out of hand. I go for a Recruiter of the Guard so that I can try to put my opponent away with Stoneforge and maybe whatever. Anyhow, he's got a Remand, so that does tap him out. So I'm going to send in a big 5 hit. See if my opponent takes it. He does, rather than block with his Insectile. I could have replayed one of my creatures, but I decided it's more important to port him during upkeep, so I do. And then I go for an Angel of Sanctions to finish him off. He's got an Abrade in response, which he uses. I should have sacked the Selfless Spirit, by the way, that was somewhat obvious. But I angel away one of his creatures, decide not to do the thing in the ice, equip my 1/1. He becomes a 4/4 when swinging, and that forces my opponent to have to chump with thing in the ice. So that threat is gone. I actually get to Knight of the Orchid pre-combat here and get a free land. I send in the team, and then it turns out my opponent doesn't have any play to stop what's going on, and we get to move to game 3? No. We get to move to game 2. And this was the game, of course, where I start worrying because I'm now 1-1 by the end of this game. All right, but initially, I mulligan into a hand that appears to have all the potential, and I get a first turn Mother of Runes. It's looking real good now. My opponent floated Ancestral, but I mean, I've got Edric that'll more than catch up. Unfortunately, so I get Fatal Push there. Top deck and Avacyn, so now I'm happy again. Really wishing Mother of Runes was alive, but you know, this isn't bad. I get to Knight here, and then misclick. I click Knight, and there's a pause of delay, and so I click again to make sure that it played, and just as I'm clicking, it pops up, says, what land do you want? And as soon as I click, it closes it and says, okay, you don't want any land? No problem, I'll give you no lands. And so I don't have a land to Swords to Plowshares that thing there. I don't have a land to play a 4-drop here. Well, I don't actually have a 4-drop here, but yeah, I'm getting beat down by a creature I couldn't plow. I can't play a 5-drop here. I have to plow it. So I'm like way behind now because of that one stupid misclick. I wasn't able to go get my Savannah. And yeah, with no play here, my opponent just crushes me with a Sundering Titan, and I lose. And now I'm feeling pretty salty on how that game was lost, and I move into game 3. So I actually had to like calm myself as best as I could and then play round 3. And I have to mulligan, which isn't the way you want to start, but look at this phenomenal, like this is a good hand, right? Don't kill him on turn. All right, Mom lives. I get to go turn 2 Stoneforge. Does it resolve? It resolves. Oh, good things are happening now. So I go fetch a Batterskull and pass. Normally, by the way, Declaration of Stone is not a card that I would like to play in any format, but in a format where your opponent can cheat monsters into play very easily, you probably need it. All right, so my opponent makes a mention of something about maybe he should read the cards, and I thought, no, I'm fine if you continue to not read the cards. All right, so I could have slapped a sword into play and then equipped it, but I decided I'd rather get a Batterskull into play and have Gaia's Cradle untapped so I can pick it up if something were to go wrong. Maybe the Abrade was a trick. You know, who knows. Anyway, opponent's got Pestermite. He misplays here. He lets me actually attack and then taps my guy, so he gets smashed for 4. So series of misplays here are certainly helping me out, not helping my opponent's cause at all. All right, I get to end step sword, and I'm being very careful here up to this point, but now I've got a chance to play Edric, so I go for it, and it gets bounced back to my hand, so yes, I am going to take a chance. Equip the sword and send in almost all of the team, not Mother of Runes, and hope that my opponent doesn't have like a artifact kill from my Batterskull, since I tap my Cradle here to make this play. I did take my opponent to 8, and my opponent's 1 card away from Kiki Jiki. I'm quite nervous about that. Of course, he could have Moxen or something. Could have just lost on the spot, but some risks have to be accepted. Timely Strip Mine there sets my opponent back and gets me out of the danger zone. I'm able to play Edric. I go ahead and give my guy Pro Blue and then move the sword over and smash. My opponent cannot block, so I'm going to get a few triggers here. I'm going to draw a card, I'm going to gain 3 life, and I'm going to pass. So my opponent obviously not in a position to block. I drew Wasteland too. Beautiful. And with the Wasteland, he goes in and scoops it up. And we move into... Wait, was that round 3? Oh, I think that was round 3. Yeah, because I already went through how I lost in round 2, right? Let's just double check. I think that was. Yeah. Mulligan into like the perfect hand. And that's it. So I finally broke the never-ending streaks of two 1s with the ever occasionally I had 1-2 mixed in there. But it was painful, and hopefully you enjoyed watching me suffer and it helps you in some fashion when you decide how you want to build your decks. I certainly think some of the other decks I built, quite a few of them could have also been winners. It just turned out that this was the one that did it. I don't necessarily think this is the best style, but I do think it's a very good style because, as it turns out, a lot of the decks, when you play Vintage, you want to play Vintage Cube. Generally, you want to play controller combo, and so often the only because the power level of so many cards is so high, but with everybody fighting for the same pool of control and combo cards, it actually opens a window for you to have these really aggressive aggro decks that incredibly punish the control decks and also give the combo players almost no time to go off. Meanwhile, you get a lot of answer cards. They did include plenty of solutions to, STP and Reflector Mage and Declaration in Stone and so on. So a lot of the nasty combos don't necessarily kill you on the spot. They usually involve cheating something into play, and you can potentially deal with that in the white deck in particular. So good stuff. Had a blast, but I probably wouldn't do it again because it was definitely not cost effective, and I don't recommend. I actually don't recommend the Vintage Cube League because, as it turns out, the prize is just 150 play points for all that crazy work. If you are going to play in the 8-4 prize single limb, well, that's where I started. I did terrible, as you can see, and gave up on that horrible idea because it's really frustrating when a single loss, like you lose to some stupid channel whatever, or tinker or whatever, and then you don't get to try to make up your money. That part's really too painful. So if this single limb just had better prize support and was Swiss, I would recommend it. But as it stands now, with the way they've set up the cube, unless you're a cube guru, which clearly I'm not, I would say it might be something to avoid. Playing the single limb, and therefore if you do play the league, you're just doing it for fun because there really isn't, the prizes just really aren't there. It is fun though. Vintage Cube is probably one of the most fun formats around, frankly. I love Commander, but there's just something about Vintage Cube that's super enjoyable too. All right, so that's all I got. And if you stuck around watching all this, you must agree with me. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.